Jeff and Susan just a minute to find their way back. What she's actually got going. All right, I'd ask for a motion to reconvene in open session.
So moved.
Someone could second that, please.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the order of business. Is there any changes to the schedule that we want to make? Item F, public appearances. We have a number of people interested in making public appearances tonight. Each person will get 3 minutes, and because of the number of these, I'm going to ask you to stick to the 3-minute timeline as close as possible. We will start with Stefan Swahe. Yeah, go ahead, Stefan.
Thank you. Yep, Stefan Way. Good evening. I live at 112 Parkway, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin. I'm here to talk about the committee that was proposed towards the end of the last board meeting session regarding addressing the equity diversity gap. I think we're calling it the Equity and Diversity Committee. I don't think there's a name yet for it. I know I've sent out a draft proposal to a few of you of just some of my ideas. And the reason why I felt empowered, if you will, or I thought about sharing my thoughts on this is in the 18 years I've worked at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the role of the cybersecurity Deputy Chief Information Security Officer. I went from hating the concept of shared governance to really embracing it. So a lot of times we can think shared governance and community involvement when we bring in a lot of different voices that have different influence, different behaviors behind them, different goals, and there could be conflict that could take longer. The process can have conflict. The process can be frustrating to work through. However, in my 17 years of trying to convince the University of Wisconsin faculty, staff, students to change their behaviors about protecting data and information systems, I have learned that to embrace the idea of shared governance to make a difference for the university. And so that's why I'm asking and sharing this evening with the committee that need, or the board that need to form a committee that has somewhat of that shared governance feel. So what do you get out of shared governance when you include, for this specific committee to address the equity and diversity gaps in our district, is that you wind up being able to sift and window through a lot of information to get to the truth of the matter. And I think that this is a matter that I wish we could all say we all understand the problem, we all understand the obstacles, we all agree on those things, but we don't. And that came out very clear 2 weeks ago. And so I think this committee has a really good opportunity to form with a good balance of representatives from the board members, from teachers, from the superintendent being one of the ex-official members, as well as the board president, and definitely community members. Thank you. I think the goals of that committee, the outcome of that committee should step through a process where they review what other districts have done to address the similar gaps. I hope that the committee would be charged with interviewing other people throughout the district, reviewing the previous work that you've done and the teachers and administration has done to review this effort, and then to identify what those obstacles really are, to come up with a plan of action and milestones. So I look forward to hearing more about your ideas around that committee as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who haven't done this before, when you come up, please state your name and address for the record. Next we have, and I apologize for butchering any names, is it Rian Yeoman?
Peter, can I just ask, Stephanie, would you make sure that you, because I think I've seen that document, I think I have, would you make sure that all the board sees that?
Sure.
Just because the outline,
Okay.
so,
Very good. Thank you. I'll send it out.
okay, because sometimes some will get them and some won't.
Sure.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Ryan Allman. My address is 3009 Pheasant Run, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin. Thank you. I'm here as a Cottage Grove community member, a resident for 4 years, young family in the community with 3 children and husband. I am here to raise the topic after seeing the referendum survey of the configuration options of the proposed school additions, that a consideration of a high school option or configuration analysis be done. Second to that is, since we're short on time and this isn't the forum for that, it's a request to have a formalized meeting to include this topic, going over open-ended questions, to include the superintendent, Dan Olson, the facilities committee, school board, and any public community members that would like to participate. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tiyama Kamina.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, President. My name is Tuyama Kamida. I'm 42 Dublin Circle, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin. Over the last few months, I've asked multiple equations that what the school district is doing to reduce gaps in discipline, in math and in English. We've also formed a coalition. We've said we're here to help. We're not here to just complain and provide what's wrong, but we're also here to help. At the last board meeting, there were several staff that came out and talked about, their egos, how they, we should accept just their opinion. Not one talked about that 80% of minority kids are not proficient in math and English. Those are things that teachers would expect staff to address. Over the last decade, the district has spent many in-services on how to train people on biases and discipline gaps and all kinds of things, but those gaps still persist, okay? So these last 4 weeks, there's another in-service that the school supported, which called Justified Anger. They put on a program to teach folks how to become allies to minorities. I would like to know how many staff attended this, and how much is the district paying this group for that program? And then what is the district implementing based on that program, the money that you're spending on that? We are waiting to hear from the staff, why these gaps are still persisting, what is being done to address these gaps and make them go away. We are also here to provide solutions, and as you heard earlier, shared governance is a good thing. Just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean that you have to exclude them from the table. We are here to say, let's work together. Let's get these discipline gaps and the achievement gaps addressed. Let's lower them, and let's start making improvements on them, because over the last, especially the last 3 years, your data shows that things are getting worse for minority kids, and we are here to say that that should not continue, that trend should be reversing. So, how much time do I have left?
40 seconds.
40 seconds? Okay. I can use it all, but...
Thank you for being brief.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter, I would just add that some of us have actually attended the workshops. Unfortunately, there was a conflict with the Friends group too, which was unfortunate that one night, but, he's right, they're very insightful.
Brian Ullman.
How's it going? I'm Brian Ullman, 3009 Pheasant Run, Cottage Grove. I'm just here today to go over the proposal of a high school, just to see economically what that would do for the community compared to an elementary school. And really, we need to get some data out there before making a decision. So I'm in favor before anything gets done, just to really see the benefits of an elementary school to a benefit of a high school. And really, as someone paying taxes in the community, that should be done to make sure we're doing our due diligence as a community, to make sure we're making the right decision long-term instead of just a short-term decision. Because in the end, you're gonna pay me now or pay me later, and we're already having those issues with Glacial Drum and what happened because it didn't get done right in the beginning. So we need to make sure that we're coming up with the best option for a long-term solution.
Thank you.
Peter, I just have one question. Do you and Ryan, would it be possible for you to get suggestions to us for a way to meet and have that discussion? I know Ryan kind of specifically, do I have the right Ryan? Addressed that, saying that that would be helpful to have that conversation. You know, I would agree. So, again, having that opportunity, is that, I don't know, again,
Yeah.
if you put it
Formalized
together, at least you
opportunity.
can do the invitation and.
Okay, next we have Ryan Humer. Hummer?
Yeah.
There's an E in there. There is an E in there.
Yes, there is. Ryan Hummer, 904 Lindsay Court. How's everyone doing? I'm here regarding the Facilities Advisory Committee's recommendation. I do have probably 7 minutes of talking here, but I will hurry up. So just in regarding to the proposal, there was only one option presented. The taxpayers of Monona and Cottage Grove deserve more options and discussions about the options. The reason for the referendum was enrollment capacity issues, but in addition, the presented proposal also includes up to $40 million in capital improvements on our existing buildings. As a taxpayer in this district, I'm asking myself, do I have enough information to make an informed decision? How does the proposed impact the current and future expenses? Impact revenues to be able to maintain and operate our schools in the future? Impact economic growth and the tax burden on residential and commercial property owners? Impact the tax mill rate in the next couple of years? Are the taxpayers of this district aware that our mill rate is the highest in Dane County? Also, the highest in the Badger Conference. And in addition, we rank number 13 in the entire state, and the proposed increase would put us in the top 5 highest school mill rates. Do the taxpayers of Monona and Cottage Grove know the Facilities Committee was given a scope of assessing options for only grades 4K through 8 as directed by the school board, versus providing an opportunity for that committee to look at all facilities and the challenges that are looming? The taxpayers of Monona and Cottage Grove need to understand the initial proposal doesn't include capacity issues at the high school in 10 years or less. Though, that's if we eliminate open enrollment, which the district states no open enrollment starting next year for grades 6 through 12. Open enrollment is a revenue stream for the district that equates to about 6% of the annual general budget, which is Fund 10. Projected income for this year is about $2.5 million. A total of 128 requests for open enrollment were denied this school year, approximately 900,000 if they weren't disabled students. I understand we typically don't want to add teachers for open enrollment. I understand we receive more money for resident students, but we cannot create resident students even if we have space available. In addition, in 10 years or less, the add-on to the high school will need to increase the capacity by 200, or the capacity will increase by 225 to 250 students. That's the proposal. Is expanding the high school a real option? We already have over 1,000 students there now with no more than 250 designated student parking stalls. I understand not every student can drive, but generally sophomores are able. Madison doesn't want our students there. They have barricaded their streets, created one primary entrance and exit until a certain time, which is well after school is out, along with no parking signs. We're busing our kids all over to off-site facilities for practices. The only outdoor varsity sports that play on-site at the current high school are football, soccer, and track.
Brian?
Yeah.
Can you wrap up, please?
Yep. So what I'm asking for is the taxpayers of Monona and Cottage Grove deserve a long-term comprehensive facility plan before we go to any vote. The proposed plan seems to be short-sighted. Enrollment solution with additional cost considerations for expansion of a high school not being disclosed. It begs the question, what if we looked at a broader scope and a longer term than the facility committee was allowed? I'm asking just for a meeting in addition to everyone else's request here. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Daniel Babcock?
Hello. So I'm Dan Babcock, 205 Coyle Parkway. My wife and I have been in Cottage Grove as residents for 12 years, and we have 2 elementary-age children. In response to the survey recently sent out regarding overcrowding in our elementary schools, it's our belief that 2 options put forth were too narrow in focus. It's my understanding the Facilities Committee never explored the ideas of expanding existing schools as a more affordable short-term solution. It's also my understanding that they never explored the idea of a high school instead of a new 3 to 5 elementary as an alternative long-term solution. While the proposed solutions would fix an immediate need, it fails to address the longer-term problem of eventual overcrowding in our middle schools and high schools. It's mine and my wife's opinion that using the ground west of GDS for the purposes of a high school rather than another elementary school might be a more efficient use of tax dollars. Yes, it'd be more expensive than the current 2 proposals. However, without exploring that as a possible option, voters can't make an informed decision as to how their tax dollars can be most effectively used over the next 5, 10, and 20-year periods. I would consider spending more than either of the current options already put forth if it meant we could avoid another building referendum in the not-too-distant future. Additionally, building a new high school on the land west of GDS would solve a lot of other problems the current high school can never address, such as adequate land for athletic fields, parking, etc. For the reasons mentioned, my wife and I currently can't support either of the options the Facilities Committee has put forward. We need more options. I'd ask Dan Olson as well as the school board to hold a forum so those of us with alternatives have our voices heard. Thanks.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, my understanding the committee did consider the option of expanding existing facilities, and that was, is that correct?
Well, and the original long-range facilities planning committee.
Okay. It did do that, and it was found to be more expensive than, my understanding is it's more expensive than building new facilities, or is that
Well,
correct?
I don't know if we want to get into discussion
Okay.
now,
We're not
but
allowed to discuss it, you can ask.
No,
questions,
we can make
discuss.
clarifications.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, that option was considered. I don't know what the outcome of that entirely
It
was.
was, and there were a number of reasons why it wasn't
Yeah.
the best plan.
Next, we have Chris Olson.
Oh, thank you. I'm Chris Olson. I live at 117 Woodview Drive in Cottage Grove. We've been here for 13 years, and I have a 12-year-old daughter at Glacial Drumline. I too was somewhat disappointed with the limited choices offered in the recent survey, specifically regarding surrounding building a new school. I kind of
going through the survey, and when I originally went through the survey, before I had a chance to really even look anything up or do any research on my own, I kind of felt like instead of being given, choices A, B, C, and D, I was given choices A1, A2, A3, and A4. There really wasn't any broader choices, I guess. It was as if there was a predetermined course of action, and we were being asked which details we'd like to spend our tax dollars on. This already on top of previous referenda costs that we're still paying for now. I'd like to see broader options explored. Of course, there were some things in the survey that I would support that were very needed. Some of the basic necessary maintenance upgrades, upgrades to the security of our schools. I mean, some of those things are, in my opinion, are must-dos. But as far as the building of a new school goes, it just felt very short-sighted to me. And going back to the additional items beyond the new school, the maintenance and upgrades and such, while some of them were great, some of them I found to be premature and even a little presumptuous, like spending millions of dollars on the athletic fields of a high school that may not meet our needs in 10 years, or even less. So I too would like to, I guess, voice my support for some sort of a public forum where there can be broader discussion and look at some real options, possibly including a high school.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Anna Neal.
Okay. Anna Neal, 400 Clearbrook Terrace in Cottage Grove. I'm here just to speak about my support for the committee formation we spoke about, or you guys spoke about at the last board meeting. I just wanted to say that I very much support the formation of that committee. I also very much support having community members involved and having a diverse group, representatives from the school board and from teachers and the equity coordinator and whoever else it may be. I think there is power in numbers, and we learn from each other. And I know that I don't have all the answers, and I'm sure that we all feel that we don't have all the answers, but I think if we came together and formed this committee, we could really learn a lot. I think what Stefan had said earlier is kind of spot on. We really have a lot to learn still, so I think this committee is a good start in the right direction. I think if we first just look and review what other school districts have done, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel if someone is doing something that's already working, so we can come up and address some of those equity issues that were already addressed in other areas. And then I think it's really important to then from that identify our own district's needs, because I think there might not be a clear indication of what our district actually needs. And then just identify strategies that we can move forward and clear and concise goals. I think that when we work together with the administration, we can really do wonderful things. In my own role for work, I'm a program and policy analyst. I implement, oversee, and create numerous employment and educational initiatives for individuals who are releasing from prison. And what we've shown, what's shown through research and what we've done is have a collaborative approach. We work with multiple agencies and multiple different organizations because we've realized we're not the experts in all areas. So we draw upon the knowledge that other people have to bring to the table, and we've seen great success as a result of that. We've been able to support a very diverse workforce as a result. So I think we can do something very similar in our own districts. I'm very hopeful, I'm very eager, and I'm also here just to tell you that I'm willing to help in any way I can. So if I can be one of the committee members, I'm offering my services. So please just take that into consideration, and I'm hoping that this will be the start of really good conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have Amy Bryce.
Thank you. Amy Bryce. I live on Farmville Drive in Cottage Grove. I was debating exactly what I wanted to say that would fit into a 3-minute time frame. So what I'm going to do instead is read a comment that I received that summed up what I and the majority of the people I've heard from are feeling. The comment was as follows. Back in the day, I was one of a handful that vehemently opposed building the replacement high school where it is. It was, is, and always will be an inadequate site, not to mention all the transportation issues it presents. I was booed, heckled, and insulted pretty much every time I appeared at a meeting or hearing. Ironically, some of the very outspoken that pushed for the high school being in Monona publicly regretted that decision when the middle school situation unfolded. Next, Cottage Grove may have the students, but Monona's perspective is they have the tax base, the money, and that won out over logic and reason. And that will be the argument again. Always felt and believed that this perspective devalued the tax dollars that I and every citizen pay, and that my patronizing of Monona businesses was irrelevant. A Monona tax base and a Cottage Grove tax base, not a Monona Grove tax base. We shall see if logic and reason or politics prevail as matters move forward. And finally, I got a copy of the survey. In my opinion, not a very good one. Leading questions with limited answers. With all that being said, I don't want to continue the pattern this district has of ill-conceived ideas and questionable follow-through on those ideas, as in the case of the middle school, that started small and ended up smaller. Thus, the reason why our kids that are last in the lunch line have 13 minutes to eat maximum, and that comes from the supervisor of the lunchroom directly to me. I want the parents that have the majority of the kids in the district to be heard too. We have ideas, and from what I've seen and heard, we have a lot of incredibly intelligent, business-savvy people that are willing to help the school district be the best it can be. I have been approached by people from the school district, business community, and municipalities that have great ideas and valuable insight. Unfortunately, they are afraid to come forward for fear of repercussions from the community or their employers. I'm asking that you allow the facilities committee to hire experts or consultants to get advice on what would be best for the school district in Cottage Grove and look into other options. And finally, I'd like those parents and citizens that privately discuss their ideas and complaints to come forward and be heard and get out and vote. Cottage Grove parents need to vote. Thank you for your consideration and your time.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, in addition to the speakers, I have 12 people who registered just in support and not to speak of all 12 of them, if I can sum up, continuing, looking at additional options for facilities, including the possibility of a new high school in Cottage Grove. All right, thank you. Just a minute, I'll bring up the agenda again. Next, we're moving on to the consent agenda. I'd ask for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. This is done, please. Sorry. Okay. Recognitions? None?
Having to see that one.
Jeff?
My friend Rhonda's in the audience and it's her birthday today. So. That's my only recognition.
Correspondence and announcements? Susan?
I have a couple, although I know Dan has some too. I just wanted to, and I think the board also received these notes, but sometimes we don't, so I just want to make sure. I received 3 notes of support for the establishment of a committee to focus on the opportunity and achievement gap. I also then today received 3 calls of concern relating to the board committees. And I've asked all those individuals to please call the board president, who is in charge of appointing the board committees. One of the concerns related to the limitation of 2 individuals in the committee base. And they were particularly concerned about policy and personnel only having 2 members, as that limited limited composition may impede scheduling of meetings, presence of a quorum, and resolution of conflict when the vote is split 1-to-1. And then one of the other comments separate from that one was to make sure that the exploration of the equity gap includes a broader curriculum focus. So that's what I have. I've
Dan,
also
would you-
asked them to send it to, when they send it to me, to send it to the entire board so you can all see those things.
Dan, did you have any?
Yeah, I have just a couple of announcements, and it's written on your board docs, but just a reminder of 3 events that are coming up that our board members are invited to participate in the district. Our MG21 graduation is on Thursday, May 31st at the Monona Community Center. Monona Grove High School graduation on Sunday, June 3rd at 1 o'clock at Monona Grove High School. And then we have an end-of-year staff recognition on Friday, June 8th at 7:30 a.m. We start with the staff breakfast and then move into recognitions following. So we'll send out additional reminders to board members, but certainly you're all welcome and encouraged to attend if you can.
And I would second the MG21 graduation for board members who are not familiar with the program, and actually for members of the community and the public who it's a great way to get an understanding of that program, and I think how important it is to the district. Okay, administrative reports. Dan?
Okay, Jared's going to talk about open enrollment. I don't have anything additional to add besides my last written report.
Jared?
All right, report is in your board packets, but open enrollment's closed at the end of April. So we're in the process of reviewing all those applications, making sure incomplete applications are completed, going through the process of requesting all of our student data, IEP information from districts or students that have applied to be sent to us so we can review that. In board docs, you'll notice that we received 180 applications. The board back in January per state law approved our initial spots, so we had initially opened up 67 spots across 4K through 5, and you can see I've broken it down on the applications that we received per grade level. We are not approving at this point any new special ed openings due to the fact of our caseloads and working through that. So we will get those individuals placed, and letters will be going out to families by the end of the month, and then that will start the process of selection or people accepting or declining, and we have wait lists for some, and some we only had a number for the number of seats in first grades, for example, was 10. We only received 8 applications, so those will be quick and painless, but the other ones could be a long process. Individuals we have through the 3rd Friday in September to accept.
I noticed that happens at 3rd and 4th grade too. We didn't get enough. We can't fill our empty seats without them.
I have a question.
Jeff?
Do people reapply? Because I know we didn't take anybody last year. Would you reapply then? Or
People
not?
can reapply.
Like 6 through 12, like there's 17 in 9th grade, would they have also applied last year? Or
They
is
could
that
have.
all new people?
They could. I don't know if they're all new people, but if they weren't accepted last year, they can reapply
Because they
this
wouldn't
year.
have been accepted.
Right.
And knowing they weren't accepted, would that keep people from applying? Like,
I would say 180 applications that are total is definitely down. I think individuals, we publish that information, and DPI publishes that information, so I think individuals understand that at different levels that if there's no openings,
right.
why waste my time to apply?
Okay.
So typically we receive over 200
So
applications.
this is just it, in terms of if we open more, we might have more seats and we might have more applications and stuff like that. So this is just a window to this year only, really.
Correct.
And then there's another step on this, which is that what's the time frame? We do evaluate again if we have any open.
Yep, so we have to, once all the letters go out, we have to wait for a 30-day period.
Mm-hmm.
We will then in July reevaluate where our enrollment is based on new residents moving in, and if there are still, per board policy, how it works is board policy states that we have class size goals, and based on the number of students that are moving in, we do not take students for open enrollment if that class is already over the class size goal. And if we're classes below that, by law, we have to open up those 2 spots. So if there are any changes based on resident enrollment fluctuation, we will be back in July with that recommendation.
Okay. Susan?
Jared, I think the other thing that's really helpful, because open enrollment has been incredibly complex for us over the years. Previous boards took any and every kid, and then we were just overpowered in 6th grade. as we got into Glacial Joe one. So if we are able to work out a forum to rediscuss facilities and facility options, can we make sure that we also talk about the open enrollment issue? We found that was very important with the facilities committee, because it's very confusing to them. Some people believe we take everybody, some people think, again, it's helpful to see this number. Again, we do, I mean, generally you've told us we take the students that we can take because it brings in income, but ultimately it doesn't really give us a lot extra to work with.
No, no problem.
Again, but Dan, does that sound, because that was clearly an issue that bogged the facilities committee down.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with it. It's a complex issue, and I mean, the natural action is if you have space issues, why would you take open enrollment students? And as we know that in some cases, how you define space, by DPI standards, it is a complex issue.
Well, and you get up to 6th grade, and do you tell a student they can't be there anymore?
Prior to, what year Madison didn't allow open enrollment out? What year was that they started allowing that?
They can only deny is if they do not have so for instance.
No, but that changed a few years
it
ago, like
changed.
6, 7 years ago,
5?
that changed.
Maybe.
Well,
I remember
They
that.
couldn't, Madison essentially didn't allow open enrollment out. And
If there was an undue financial
that's right.
burden.
Right.
And then they said,
Yeah.
and the result was we actually didn't get all that many open enrollment applications, because most of our open enrollment applications come from Madison. We really had maybe a factor of 5 expansion in the open enrollment since that.
Well, in fact, aren't we number 2?
Yeah.
McFarland being number 1 because of the virtual school.
Anybody have any questions about the open enrollment? Okay. Board reports, the CESA 2 annual meeting, Susan?
so CESA 2, as you know, some of you have heard about this, Andrew, it might be new of you, but it's a consortium of various school districts in the southeastern part of the state. There are 49, I believe. And they're clustered into different groups, and our group is Deerfield, Madison, McFarland, and Monona Grove. This year, there was somebody from every place except McFarland. But each cluster elects a delegate who meets on the CESA Board of Control, CESA 2 Board of Control, and they have meetings once a month just like this and do very similar kinds of work. So they are required by law to have an annual meeting every year, and that's what this was that I attended. And our representative is from Deerfield, and he was just elected last year, so he has 2 years to go on your term, so you can safely go next year without worrying about being elected to that. This does meet in Whitewater once a month. Ian did it 1 year. They have a newer agency administrator, Dan Hammerhan, and he came in at a time when they had been kind of rebranding and going through some changes, and so part of it was a presentation of where the CESA is and what kinds of services they provide. They are a cooperative purchasing agency, and we do purchase things through them. They also, this year, one of their newer things is they've got some expertise in EL, and they can help with some of those areas as needed. They always have a guest speaker at this, and the speaker this time was John Bish, who's the Protective Security Advisor with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And it was interesting to listen to him. He talked mostly about active shooter scenarios and the threat preparedness. Some of the similar things that we had heard with our presentation to the community with the ALICE program. Although he talked about a little bit of a preference for making it really simple for kids, just like the stop, drop, and roll was kind of something that kids got used to hearing for fire. Run, hide, fight is what they encourage, that if you just drill that in, because it talked about, and we just read about this thing in the paper the other day with the current school shooting, that, as much as you can train people, there's still going to be a certain amount of chaos. And so his point was, if you get that drilled in the kids' heads, run, hide, fight, that they're more likely to, and that's what a lot of those kids did in that school. Anyway, it was interesting, and that's about all I have to report on the meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Sue? Thank you.
Peter, I just have one question. There was a personnel committee meeting last night, and I noticed that we don't have a report on that. What's your plan for when that report's up?
The next considering the short time frame, we'll have a
Well,
report on that
generally
in the next meeting.
particularly when we're gonna have a discussion on the issues that we were talking about last night, it's helpful to have that update. And I know it's sometimes difficult, but generally you've asked us to do it, so.
Do you mind if I
Go ahead.
comment? And you're right, normally, and we weren't sure at the time we noticed the agenda, you know, the personnel committee was meeting. But the other, I agree, the other issue though, the only thing that was on the agenda last night was bargaining, so that's all closed session, so it can't be commented on publicly
Okay.
anyway.
Yeah, not,
You
and,
didn't do any meet and greet last time?
Correct.
Only bargaining?
Only bargaining, yeah.
Okay.
okay, next we move on to possible action items, starting with the non-represented support staff compensation. Do you wanna talk about that, Ed?
Okay, yeah, I'll take, and then Jared can provide any details, but, so what we're asking for is a base wage increase for all non-represented staff, we've talked about in the
Support
budget.
staff.
Support staff, thank you, of 2.5% increase, and so you have the list of all support staff members and what that base wage would be, with that increase.
Susan?
I'd move approval of the non-represented support staff compensation for 2018-19 as presented.
A second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, contract for the Director of Communications and Community Engagement. Dan, do you want to comment on that?
Well, recommending the contract as presented.
Susan?
I move approval of the contract for Director of Communication and Community Engagement as presented.
Been moved and seconded. All, discussion? Jeff?
I'm gonna be voting no, but it has nothing to do with the person we hired. I just think that this is a priority in a time of tight budgets that we don't need. I think, there was a lot of talk recently about our, when we had our referendum thing the other night about safety. There's a lot of things we can do for safety, and one of the research, the best data driven is add more counselors, social workers, psychs, add social emotional learning, like add people that are actually gonna be in front of the students, and I would rather, I think it's more important we put our money there and not in a PR position, so I will be voting no, but it has nothing to do with the person that's
Okay.
doing it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff, but just to clarify, the funds to support this position cannot be used on any of
Right.
those positions.
No, I get
So I
that.
wanna make it clear that,
So they're not
Different
competing.
pockets, same jeans, so
It-
we're gonna be
well,
asking
it's
for
not.
67.
Not really,
Well,
yeah,
okay.
okay.
I mean, just point that ultimately it does come from the taxpayer, but it is separate funds, it is not our general fund.
Right, no, I get that,
Yeah.
for now,
Yeah,
for now.
okay. Anyone else? Susan?
You know, I struggled, not with the position, but I struggled with the cost and kind of the balance with the need in administration. And I think if you listen to the comments that we heard tonight from every single person that was here, if we had a community director, we would have had a public meeting about the options, we would have probably had 4 instead of 2. We would have had 4 safety meetings instead of 2. We would have had, serious discussions, including public input on English curriculum. I really think the person that's coming into this position is gonna truly be a gift to us. It's a parent, it's a grounded community member, and she's really nice and listens, even to an old lady, grandma. So I think ultimately, this is something I have gotta support, and it's not easy because of the funding, but I think it's, you just reaffirmed to me, each and every one of you here tonight, you're not doing it well enough yourself. And we need to dramatically improve on the way we're communicating with the community, with the teachers, with the students. And obviously I'm not doing it well enough, so I need help. So I think that's a strong statement about our need for this position.
I feel bad for her, I think you gotta work in 5 nights a week and about 80 hours a week, so. We'll have to see what happens on that one.
Not really.
So do we do a roll call vote?
We don't have to,
We don't
if it's
have
not,
to.
unless it's requested. Any other comments? Okay, it's been, moved and seconded. Is that right? Yes. Did I miss that part? No. So, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
So if I could comment briefly,
Yes.
so now that the board has approved it, I would like to publicly announce our new person that has been hired. She's with us tonight, Katie Burns Kaiser, and we're extremely thrilled to have her join us and with her experience, and we will be, as mentioned, plenty of work to do, but she's going to be a great addition to our team. So welcome, Katie.
Hire someone taller.
You missed her, she's usually chasing a 4-year-old.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the contract for the high school associate principal. Sue?
I move approval for the contract for the high school associate principal as presented.
Is there a second?
A second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Contract for curriculum coordinator.
I move to accept.
Thank you.
Nobody else is gonna do
Just
it. I
saying.
move to accept
Good for you, Andrew.
the contract for curriculum coordinator
As presented.
as presented. Thank you.
Okay. That's it.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is the lease agreement for Maywood School with the Madison Metropolitan School District.
Move approval
As presented?
as presented.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Dan, do you want to comment on this for a moment?
Sure, and actually Jared can just share the details, but the current lease agreement expires at the end of this school year, and so we've renewed it we're asking for approval to renew for an additional 5 years under very similar terms that we have in the current agreement, and so Jared worked very closely with the folks from the Madison District to get this ironed out to bring to the board. And it has been already approved by the board in MSD.
The Madison School Board.
Yeah.
Dean?
Jose, just for public information, they admit 25 new pupils each year in kindergarten, is that correct?
Five.
No,
Five
they have
hours,
25 that they admit, and we have 5 of those places,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have some benefits to our students in the district as well.
The lease agreement is for $177 and
$485
$177
for 5 years.
$177,485 for each of 5 years. I have to say, I believe that this has been very successful. We debated this up for a bit when it came around the first time, and I think this has been a very successful partnership, utilizing that building. It pays our costs on the building, so that our carrying costs on that facility are
Very,
zero
very
to
minimal. The district is just the landlord. Madison School District pays all utilities, minor upkeep, obviously just like any landlord. If the boiler goes out or we have major repairs to the roof, we take care of that. But over the last 6 years, we have spent less than $10,000 on minor repairs that we needed to do. And so this has been a net positive for the district to be able to do that. It does help fund additional things in the school district. In addition to the next item that you will be asked to approve is the 6603, and that's where we have the ability to place 5 students, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But some of the revenue that we do receive allows us to help place students in a dual language immersion program.
Have you reviewed the interior condition of the building?
I have personally not. Jeff Carr has walked through with buildings and grounds for Madison.
Okay, and we're satisfied with the continued upkeep on the
Yep.
interior building. Dean, you had your hand up?
Now,
Anyone else? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is the 6603 agreement with Madison School District regarding the Western Monday.
So this is the agreement that Dean mentioned, allows us the opportunity to have our resident students participate, into the school. So this is the agreement we need to approve as well to continue that program.
Dean?
my question, how many applicants do we get for those 5 positions?
10 to
16 to 22, just over the last, that's probably the average over the last 5 or 6 years.
So many more than we can fill,
Yep.
than we can accommodate.
And just as a, just as
Mhm.
an interesting note, one of the things I do is usher at the Overture Center, and today we had a school show where it was, I had never seen this before, Disney does Disney musicals in the schools, and they pick out, they have schools apply to be able to be in these performances, and they actually send people out to work with the kids, and one of the 3 schools was Nuestro Mundo, along with, Leopold and, I don't know if the other, another Madison school, but it was really neat. They work with the kids over a period of weeks, and they get to perform in the Capitol Theater, and the parents come in, and it's just really a wonderful experience for the schools, and it was fun to see. Even though it's not our school, it kind of, we have that little feeling that it's sort of part of our district, because it has been important for the kids from our district who've gotten to go there, and it's certainly a service we would not be able to afford to provide otherwise. So it was neat to see.
Is that something we could ever look into if we have that many kids applying?
Yeah, they're probably looking at schools that are pretty much Title I type
Dual
schools.
language
is what I
immersion?
gathered, and, well, no, the others were not.
But I mean,
Leopold is a
couldn't, not
community
that,
school.
I mean, couldn't we look into doing a dual language immersion?
We could down the road,
program, if
yeah,
we have 22
yeah.
kids a year applying? I'm assuming it might be even more than that if it was, in district and not have to leave our district.
Could be a question for a later time, probably.
Right,
Not
right.
on the agenda, yeah.
But if I don't say it now, I'm gonna forget it, so my memory lasts
So
about
we
10 minutes.
We at least look at it in the next, 5 years, because we'll have that leased out for
Right.
5 years.
Right. But they only have 5, so we still have a group of kids.
So it's like I'm gonna have to get reelected.
Right.
And just to be clear, what happens with those 5 students is the first 2 are at no cost to us, and the next 3 are at the open enrollment rate. Is that correct?
Jan?
Sorry. So there is some cost to the supporting,
There is,
for
yeah.
us, supporting the students. Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
No.
No, it hasn't?
No, it hasn't.
That's too many of these.
Well,
Susan.
I move approval of the 6603 agreement with the Madison School District regarding Nuestro Mundo Charter School.
Second.
Okay, now it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next, discussion items, and first is the facilities planning
Okay.
process.
All right, so we put this as a discussion item. As you recall, we had a board workshop a week ago where the board, along with the members of the Facilities Advisory Committee, received the results of the community survey. And so there was a little bit of an opportunity for dialogue that evening with regard to, the results and questions and so on. Our Facilities Advisory Committee is scheduled to meet again next Tuesday, in which they will look at their preliminary recommendation, consider the results of the community survey, and then look to modify that recommendation, present a final recommendation to the board. So it's an opportunity tonight to make sure we talk through the process and make sure as far as, certainly there is I think the discussion and the communication that we've had, we had a number of individuals tonight, I'll ask for an opportunity for more dialogue about other things that were not part of that survey. So certainly the communication plan, that would be part of it moving forward, but it's not a matter of, we don't wanna wait, so that's something we certainly wanna consider and make sure that many of the questions that are raised, there are answers to, so we have to look to communicate, and others, we need to talk about what has been done or it hasn't been done. One of the things that occurred to me that might be part of that communication is going back to the long-range facilities planning committee that started 3 years ago, and the work that they did, which was comprehensive K-12, looked at all buildings. And then from that committee was a recommendation to narrow it to a K-8 focus to address those needs, and that's where the current committee picked up. And so I think going back and revisiting the work of that committee, a lot of the answers are in there, and everything was looked at that time. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have continued dialogue, so we'll certainly make sure that we have an opportunity for that. As far as a timeline, I know the board members know this, but I'll just state for publicly to make sure everyone understands. There's been no decisions made. We've talked about certainly the possibility of a referendum. One of the things, the charges of that Facilities Advisory Committee was to be advisory to the board about the options and advise whether or not they recommend a referendum. If so, what would be the right time for that? What would be the dollar amount? And of course, some of the specifics about the types of things that would fund. And so they'll continue that discussion, as I mentioned, next week. Again, we said that if the earliest that the board could go to referendum would be the fall of 2018. If the board would choose to do that at the fall election, you have to make a decision by August to do that. And so that's the timeline we're working under, so that if that is the option chosen, to make sure that there's enough opportunity for planning to be able to make that decision by August. And one way or another, the board will make a decision. It'll either be to go to referendum or to decide to do something different. And so in addition to the regular board meetings, we certainly will hold any other additional workshops as needed to make sure we have that opportunity for dialogue. And as I mentioned, the communication, we have been working on a communications plan. It's in draft form. We'll make sure that'll be part of the discussion moving forward, that we share out not only with the board and the FAC, but publicly as well. So that's part of the workings, the work that we've done. So that it is kind of a rough outline of the timeline and the work that we've done, but it's an opportunity for discussion for the board tonight to either comment on the process, on the survey, or ask questions and things that we need to follow up on moving forward.
Has he gotten us a list of comments yet?
I'm sorry.
Has the guy got a list of
I've
comments
received contact this morning. He's working on that, so should have it shortly. Yep.
And then,
Susan?
Dan, could you, so we have documents in front of us that have a nice summary of the different things that have happened in the committees. And I don't know if the community knows about that or how to access those documents.
Yeah, so there's a link to all these documents on the home page of the district website.
Okay, so they're now on that, when you click on the front, on the very first page, you don't have to go into board docs.
Right.
Okay.
So you go to the home
And
page of the
everything's-
district website, there's a link to the Facilities
And the
Advisory
survey
Committee
is-
and
survey
all those
results
documents
and
are
like
there.
this 516 PowerPoint document
Yep.
that kind of summarizes and tells you which building is gonna be two-full rent.
Yep.
That's all.
Yep.
Great, okay, super.
Dean?
So you can't see it. in the
Follow
box.
up on Susan's comment. Some interactions I've had, senior center group and so forth, I think it would be interesting to, I don't think everybody knows what's on that website.
Mhm.
And if you find at a certain point in time, you might wanna consider, almost a mailing out that could direct people to maybe a set of documents or a reduced volume of critical documents that come down to the final choices, and maybe more of a Q&A rather than pouring through all of the options or something. To find some way to get a shortened summary and that people know where to get that. I think it would be, to some extent, that you can get more online without having to mail all that stuff out or have meetings in which 30 people come who have an intense interest and no one else gets it and so forth. You may want to do both, some of it both, but that would be, I think following up on Susan's suggestion would be a good one, but I think to come into a volume of 40 blue and white colored things will overwhelm people, but I think it might be worth a district mailing that does something. Just give it some thought anyway.
Yeah, without question, and I think, as we know, the communications have to be in many and varied forms, so, FAQs are critical, that we have that, but how that's communicated out, you're right, whether it be through district mailings, website, whether it be, meetings, all of the above, need to happen, without question.
Susan?
I think one of the things that was reflected in the survey, what it appears is that the community doesn't appear to be committed to funding athletic facilities. Tim, I'm telling you, a gut feel that I had all along was, even with the facility committee, we could have improved how we presented our needs and how that, and how we could address those needs. So when you look at one of the documents I just looked at, that says basically funding for athletics, and it comes up 0. Part of it was the way they asked the question, but another part of it was that, I mean, until you have kids in this district and you understand how many kids participate in extracurriculars. I mean, I had a parent pull me over this morning because their kid was going to play softball in lacrosse in an unheated bus and it's 78 degrees and it's a 2.5-hour ride. I mean, these parents are committed, their kids are committed, and we've known about the inadequacies because we've done the survey on the soccer field and the football field. Came up to $1 million cost. Again, if you tell people it's going to cost you $14 million to put in, yeah, but what do we really need and what could we accommodate? And that's exactly what we as a board are going to have to do in terms of maintenance projects. Because the support for $88 million didn't show that we could pass that. So it means somewhere minimally at the $88 million, no matter what kind of building we put in there, we're looking at 57.
Yeah, and without question, and as you know, again, our committee is advisory, they've done a lot of work, but ultimately, and the document we just added this afternoon, you know, just a draft document to help summarize, but remember, there's really 4 key things that we're trying to address. One is the capacity issues, okay, and so the preliminary recommendation, as you know, was a new elementary school to address those capacity issues. But that's one of the decisions that the board will need to make about accepting that or you know, not. Secondly, maintenance and security. You know, we have a lot of deferred maintenance. We know over $14 million total of things that we'd like to do to all buildings. Third, renovations of learning spaces. That, you know, we've identified a number of areas that we'd like to provide some upgrades to improve learning spaces. And then the fourth is the athletic, you know, fields and that we have challenges with. So, so again, the committee has done a lot of work. We'll continue to do, but this board's going to have a lot of work before it as well, as far as making those priorities.
Right, I think also put in addition, because, you know, fourth is athletics, put in an addition for the subcommittee to show what revenue can come in when you improve the athletic areas for football, the spring. We have a lot, especially out in Cottage Grove as well. We need to have WIAA events to bring in revenue, especially with the spring sports. With football, we should be good with football and basketball, but the spring sports, the track and field, you know, back in the days of I did high school here, my last 2 years, we had the Monona Grove Open, a track and field, huge event. We had 20, 25 different schools for that one Saturday event. Huge revenue. I know because I was the high jump champion. Okay? Huge revenue. People was there to see me. Okay? But these are the things, I think this is the things that the community need to know, is they know that they're giving away money for education. I know it's good heart, whatever, but we need to show the possible revenues as well that will bring in to cover some of these bases that we're spending out as taxpayers. So I think that's something they need to look at as well and also present to ease the community.
I remember that night because the applause woke me up over on Lake Monona.
And I apologize for
that. If you don't mind, just one other comment. And obviously, we're not going to have an opportunity to address every question that was either, you know, has been raised, or, you know, we need to have much more in-depth dialogue. But just one of the considerations when we talk about new buildings versus additions, and one of the real challenges with additions, it's easy to add on classroom space, but the problem is many times the common areas don't support those additional students. For instance, we know we have lunchroom space issues already at Glacial Drumlin. All of our schools, if you just add on classrooms, that means you probably need to try to expand cafeteria, gym space as well, which may or may not be possible. So, so not that you can't do it, but you know, those are the types of things that are the challenges in looking at and weighing that cost benefit versus new buildings. Parking, you know we have all of our buildings, when the older buildings that were designed were in the days that we had a lot less parent drop off and pick up. Everyone rode the bus or walked. Well, now we have a lot more cars, and to manage that traffic flow, as you know, is a real challenge, you know, as well. So all those considerations, you know, come into play, and you know, I think the district over the years has done the best they can to try to manage that, but it's a continuing battle to deal with those as well. So, but to talk about it for 5 minutes doesn't, you know, do it justice. Every one of those things we need to, you know, the FAC, you know, has spent hours and hours. This board has over the years, and so we have to make sure we have that information. You're right. You can't just say click and go to the website and find this. We have to have those opportunities for dialogue.
Dean was first.
Yes, but I think I do think if you took every facility on every sport and brought it up to WIAA, so you can hold a tournament there, oftentimes you're investing a lot of money for an occasional crowd. I mean, one of the things you'd have to do at the high school on the tennis courts is that you got to change them around, because evidently you can't have the sun shining in somebody's eyes east-west. They could be north-south, so they see it out of the corner of their eyes. But the cost of that is what, maybe $500,000 or up to $500,000. And you have to ask yourself, it serves its purpose as maybe a JV facility or you know, a physical education facility. But is there a better way to spend? Is there a better way of spending $500,000? And that's the kind of decisions the committee has to make, and we have to make as well. Yeah. You know, I don't know. That's where I'd spend my first. Yeah. 500,000.
I think one of the other things that we haven't really talked much about, though, that wherever this board lands on the decision, in all likelihood, it will not address all needs, and so the idea about, okay, what's next then? If you can't address all needs now, what is the plan for when you are going to address them? And not that they'll be firm, but that's the thing that we have to have that consideration, because we do know from the community survey, we had a list of potential projects up to 87 million. Okay, and the board knows this. I don't know if it's out publicly yet, but the survey basically showed that the community would support up to about $57 million of those projects. Well, right away then there's, you know, if you rely on that data, we're well short of all those needs. And so there's going to be a lot of discussion about, okay, what is there support for, and how do you prioritize? And then what is the plan then to, if you do a referendum for some of them, or about the rest of them? How are you going to do that? When? So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Susan?
Well, and I would assume part of that discussion would be, and this wouldn't be easy, but taking some of those items maybe that were maintenance and seeing if it might be realistic to put some of those into our regular capital budget down the road, and so that we have a little more money for this. Obviously, we talked about the whole football stadium, which has been in need since I got here on the track, which we hear about all the time, which we did a pretty major renovation that was supposed to last 7 years, but I think we're nearing the end of that 7 years. So that's, you know, those are, you know, we had coaches at the time who didn't want their kids to run on one of the tracks because it was that bad. And now it's not bad now, it's safe, but it's, I mean, we aren't gonna have kids running on it if it's not safe, but it is an issue, and that's a pricey one. It didn't come up high on the list, you're right, so I know what we do about that. But what I was going to say is I think part of what I understood when we get the recommendation back from the facilities committee, and then we start kind of digging into this in more depth about where would we prioritize, is that we will also be doing focus groups. Is that?
Well, that's not really the role of the facilities advisory committee.
No, but I meant the board.
That has to be determined.
Okay,
so
we
certainly,
could. I mean,
absolutely.
that's one of the things I heard talked about, that targeting various groups in both communities to do more focus groups and see, you know, what people think. And I think in addition to having 200, you know, it did occur to me sort of late in the game that we had the 2 listening sessions, and they are, there was a tape of one of them, and it is online, and it's pretty easy to find on that if you go to the facilities resources. The presentation and the slideshow separately. But when the survey went out, all of a sudden more people were paying attention, because that's always part of our problem in communicating, is getting people to pay attention. We feel like we've talked about, and we have actually,
For 5
I
years.
feel like it for good reason, we have talked about this over a period of several years. And so we have considered a lot of different options and weighed them and tried to narrow it down. And we did have the one committee that you mentioned previously that had community members on it. And they came up with the recommendations, which then shaped what was given to the current facilities committee. So we have gone through a lot, but clearly a lot of people don't know that. And not to bring up a sore subject again, but it reminds me of when we were talking about having to close Maywood originally because of budget and just numbers, and the enrollment didn't support it. And we felt like we'd been talking about that for a whole year, and we hadn't heard very much, and we thought people must understand it, and all of a sudden, wham, obviously we had not done the job. When you talk about how we haven't done a good enough job, we felt like we had not educated the public, they didn't understand it, and we held off for a year until we could run more groups and have the schools work together and explain how we were gonna merge Maywood into Winnequa. And by the time then we made that decision a year later, not everybody loved it, but they were much more comfortable with it and understood it. So it is a lot about communication, and Katie, I know you're listening. But I think here we have more work to do too, because I guess when we started seeing these questions coming in, I thought, well, obviously these people that weren't able to attend those sessions, and now that we've got everybody's attention, maybe we should have had another one once the survey went out. It was kind of too late to organize one then, but doesn't mean we can't do that going forward and can't think about focus groups. So I think there will be more opportunity for discussion, and you're right, we do have a lot of work to do to sift it down to a lower amount.
Susan?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that, I think one thing the survey did was identify that we haven't communicated well enough, because this went out to all the households, and it was difficult. Susan said, just quit going to Ken's, But you go in there, and all they want to do is talk about the facility and getting information about it, and they don't know how to fill it out. You go to the seniors, and so I agree. I think this is another great opportunity for getting back out in the community and hearing their questions based on the survey. So we have one major, big, huge question that was generated by sending the survey. It's our job to respond. So when we see a major question like that, sure, FAQs are great and focus groups are great, but I think minimally we need to respond fairly well as possible based on the historic information we have about the studying of the issue of the high school and any other options that might be suggested. I mean, again, we looked at the K-5, 2 K-5s in the Cottage Grove community, and there were very clear reasons that did not move forward. It may have been the board members at the time, it may have been other criteria, but the fact is, so maybe one of the things we want to think about as we're putting materials together, Katie, is listening to questions that we're hearing now generated, and I'm getting at the senior center as well, generated by the survey, and then showing that the other options that were explored and the criteria that were used to eliminate that. A new high school, $94 million, and right now we don't even think we can pass 57.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, and just to remind everyone, there were really two purposes of the survey. One, of course, was to get feedback and data to work with, but the other was as a communication device. You're right, prior to that time, okay, sure, we put things on the website, we have things in the local paper, we do the best we can, but we also know that not everyone has access to that, and so by getting the survey out to every household, it also creates an awareness of the work that's been done. And you're right, one of the things is it's generating more questions, which we knew, and we're taking note of those, and that will form our communication plan moving forward. So, absolutely.
Well,
Susan?
and I think the other thing was our immediate problem, and it is an immediate problem, or it's pretty close to immediate. It really is at the elementary level, and it is in Cottage Grove in terms of where the kids are. So we do have to do something about that. We can all complain that the glacial government could have been structured differently, whatever. The fact is, it wasn't. By the time we all got on this board, it is what it is, and the decisions that were made were made. So we just have to keep moving forward. It doesn't help to go back and I've heard some of the same concerns. We should have done this, we should have done that. We can't, it doesn't help us anymore.
never
We
do
have to
any
look at what we
perfect
have, we can't undo that, and we have to just move forward with in the best way we can, and the way that makes the most sense. And, the other thing I think that people need to remember is that from the time, if we do pass a referendum on whatever we do, if we do ask for an elementary school, it takes about 3 years to open the doors to that building. So it puts us down to the point where the schools really are overcrowded. And even though now the numbers show that they're not overcrowded, if you ask the people in them, they will tell you they are, because of the lunchroom. Somebody referred to it tonight, the multiple 4 lunch periods. When I taught middle school at Winnequa, when we were overcrowded for 10 years, and we had 4 lunch periods, and I taught 8th grade, we ate at 10:30 in the morning. So when we had study hall later in the day, we had snacks. So I've been there, done that, not great, but you kind of adjust to it, you do it, you make it work. But one of the goals of Glacial Drumlin was to not have that, and here we are doing it again, and we've been doing it for a few years. So clearly, and you look at, Cottage Grove School has that beautiful gymnasium, but the truth is, if we added more classrooms, they wouldn't be able to schedule kids for Phi Ed class into that gymnasium, because it's full every period. It's totally used. Cafeteria space there is not good. The cafeteria space at Glacial Drumlin is not good. The gym's too small, we can't do anything like that. So, you kind of look at what can we maybe fix, and then how large a school do you want is the other thing, not only the capacity, but, when I hear about districts looking at high schools of 3,000, 3,500, I think, man, I'd have a hard time supporting a high school that size. So all kinds of things go into the thinking of what we want to do eventually, and I think we have talked about also, whatever school we end up trying to build, we have to talk about the size of it, but also design it so that it could be added onto if necessary. That would be a possibility if we could with the land, depending on how the space is. So there are a lot of things that go into all of this, and and the high school. We'll have to talk about that more. It is a little harder to project 10 years down the road what exactly will happen. If interest rates continue to go up, will the housing market slow a little bit? I don't know. It's hard to, we do know that we have right now 2 large classes of open enrollment in the high school, because we were accepting about 30 kids every year freshman year. We've not done that for the last 2 years. So once the current juniors and seniors move out, you're not going to see that same number of open enrollment coming in. It will be more residents in the staggered open enrollment we've got in the other grades. So that allows a little space there as well. So it is a complicated picture to paint. And that's, we had discussions on this board about the survey, and the survey, no survey is ever going to be perfect, but we felt like it had to communicate some of the most important information. We felt like, I know I heard some criticism tonight that there weren't enough choices. We thought, like, if you give too many choices, people get totally confused, and they don't have enough information. And again, we had followed a process to arrive at these 2 choices. Probably one of the more things I was more disappointed about was that there wasn't a clearer decision between grade configuration of the new elementary school. It was kind of, that we'll have to have a whole lot more discussion about that, and that's where I'm thinking folks will help with too.
If you look at the board docs, there is at the bottom of the administrative content, there's some questions for the board to answer. The reason we're discussing this is to give guidance back to the Facility Advisory Committee about what it is that we need from them if they're going to making a final recommendation. And those questions are, 1, if they're going to recommend, I'm sorry, you have given us guidance on this, the draft of that. Questions, which would be, if we're going to referendum, if yes, what does the board need to keep in mind? What are the big picture priorities, and for what dollar amount, and when? And if no, what do you recommend as next steps? And so the question to the board is, do we want to expand on or subtract from that list of questions so that we can give some guidance to the Facilities Advisory Committee? Comments? Do we like them as is written, or just keep that in mind as we go forward discussions? Oh, everybody likes them. It's easy.
I think they're pretty good. That's a good group, and they may come up with some other things. I mean, I think they'll be free to tell us if they think they're, I mean, I like the one about what does the board need to keep in mind, because I think that group's likely to come up with some things. And I don't know, I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah, my comment is though, we need to think about the questions that are coming in from the community, because nothing's I think makes things harder for us to accomplish than having people with unanswered questions, because obviously people will have different points of view on everything and all the different options and so on, but we do need to provide the information, make it clear to the public when we get questions coming in. Like we've had tonight, I think we need to look through. We have, I think, 5 years we've been doing between the long-range facilities planning and the facilities advisory committee. I think it's about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Five years. In fact, it's a longer time period than you expect the projections of enrollment to be accurate. Our experience has been, the 5 and 10 year enrollment projections have been problematic. But I think if we look through the materials we have, I think we have a lot of answers already for the questions that have been raised before us. And for those that don't, that we have, I think it's important for us to get some additional answers, going forward, even if it's things that we may or may not consider. Actually, if some of these answers come up a certain way, we might, well, that's worth considering. But I think we do need to look at getting answers to these communities as much as possible, as much as we can. Particularly, we've showed this high school thoughts about building a high school. I know what the total proposal is, which is make the current high school middle school, build a high school, make glacial drumlin an elementary. That covers our elementary enrollment issue. Capacity issue. For example, it might be worthwhile to at least to clarify the issue, to just get ballpark estimates of the total cost of doing something like that.
Yep.
I think that would be important. Jeff?
A few things. One, I agree. I think if we're going to spend a major referendum, we need to make sure that we're spending it exactly how we need to do it. Because we probably won't be here, but in 10 years, if we have to come back for another 20, 30, 40 million, you can really handcuff that board, I think, because hopefully a lot of these people will still be here. Second thing is, I do think we need to move forward, but we also have to be cognizant of things in the past, because as they say, if you don't follow history, you're doomed to repeat it. So, and the third thing is about the facilities, the activity facilities. I would just like to go public, because I know a question is, have we looked at sponsorships? 2 years ago, I chaired the community engagement committee. I was close to a plan to take sponsorships to cover all of our new fields, and I was voted down by the board by 4 members. Hopefully, in the future, because there's a path forward, because schools all over the state have done it, and they've done it, and they put up some amazing facilities using sponsorships. We have a great community here. We have a lot of businesses. We have a lot of people that want to support us, but for some reason, 4 board members felt that we didn't want their money. But hopefully going forward we can do that.
I wouldn't characterize it that way, but go for it.
Yeah. So I think there is a path forward to handle our activities, fields and stuff without going to referendum, and I would hope that wouldn't sink our referendum because of a poor decision 2 years ago. But that's what I want to say. I think there is a path forward. We can do that. I don't think it'll take a lot of work, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of other school districts have put up some amazing things, and we could do the same thing as easy as they do. So that's all I have to say.
I think we should seriously consider all options because we do have facing a lot of facilities needs.
Yeah.
Susan.
And I think the other challenge is, and I think if you were here tonight and you listened to our conversations, is that once you start focusing on facilities, it consumes you, because it's difficult decisions, and there's a lot of study to be done. The thing that concerns me when this happened, and I watched this very clearly happen during the time that they're working on glacial drumlin, we kind of stopped talking about the kids and the curriculum, and are we meeting we're talking about meeting the overcrowding needs, but are we meeting the needs of the kids in terms of the programs and supporting the teachers and we don't hear a lot about that. How's the new science, biology, chemistry, physics going? And have we improved our ACT scores in science from being pretty bad to better? I mean, so I think we continue to be challenged in finding time to also talk about our strategic plan and student learning and supporting the teachers as we go forward with the facilities. So hopefully we're going to be able to find balance.
I'm going to ask one more time, are we satisfied with the questions as presented, or the feedback for the Facility Advisory Committee as presented on the board docs? Okay. Susan?
Are we going to put in any, do we have a plan for any more public meetings to at least minimally communicate the survey results? We really haven't done that. I don't know if that's what's important, but I think if over 1,000 people took the time to do this survey, they may be interested in what the results are.
Right, so we do have a mailing going out to every household, okay, with a summary of the results. That'll be going out very shortly.
So I would say to you, you get me a letter, I may or may not read it, you've got 50% chance on this. If you have, if I was motivated to do the questionnaire, the survey, and you had a meeting to talk about that and put it up and listen to my input, that I would go to. This piece of paper coming in the mail doesn't allow me any opportunity for input. And the fact that several of us who feel we are in the know in the community, including in the know in the Cottage Grove community, knew nothing about the movement to talk about high school, tells me that I'm not communicating well enough. I'm not getting that information. And I think to go out now with the people who took the time and energy to do the surveys and have discussions about the results and what those might or might not mean, I think would be helpful, at least to me as a board member.
Susan?
Well, I would suggest that the mail's not wasted though, because we had 69% of non-parents said they preferred to get
Not
their news
wasted.
through district mailings. 44% of parents, non-staff parents, said they would like to get it through district mailings. 83% of parents, non-staff, said they preferred email. And you had 33% of non-parents saying they preferred email. The problem would be we probably won't have their email addresses. But 69% saying that they like mail means they'd probably open it. And then the other thing is, doing that doesn't mean we don't also have these other, that we don't also have another meeting or focus groups or whatever. I think we do need to talk more about that at some point and figure it out. But the survey I was kind of happy to see it, because that's a question we've been asking and trying to get input in for a long time, is how do people, what can we do to help, help get
Great
the word out
slide.
more, and it was very helpful.
And you're absolutely right, we do need to do that. I just think we're still not getting that input back. We're just sending it out.
You have to have multiple ways to get it out.
Sure, we do.
Depending on your
Including
age
social
and your
media.
comfort with technology,
And
you
if you're
know.
on Facebook, you'll miss some of this
Okay,
stuff.
Jeff?
One thing I would like the facilities committee to look at is, if we go with the recommendations on the survey, there were two, right? There was one, like building new 3.5, and then the other one was community schools. I've sat through numerous meetings where community schools, after the end of every meeting was, community schools is not it, not it. Why did it go to the community engagement? Why did it go to facilities committee? Well, we just wanted to look at it, and they don't believe it in either. And then it makes the survey, and now it's like 50-50. So you have, that's got to either be erased or something, because I thought we had it done. I've wasted so many hours
Well,
on that.
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff. Actually, that's going to be a board decision. The FAC has given you some information. Of course, remember the preliminary recommendation was, well, we prefer this, but you need to look at this as well. That really, you're right, the survey's inconclusive, which is kind of what we expected,
I thought the board decision was long before FAC was even formed that it's a dead in the water, and if it gets in there, it's
Well,
going to muddy the water.
are you
and
talking
cause it-
K-5? Because that
I'm
was
talking
what we-
making glacial, or CGS and to the Prairie, both, what is it?
4-2K.
Right.
4-2K.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
4K2.
No, that
4K2, yeah.
That's why that was in the survey, the board never killed that.
The
But I
board
thought
never
we
discussed
killed
that
it.
option.
Like that one.
I thought
It's not
community
big.
schools was a dead issue.
Take
We had,
care
we
of
had, we had,
space.
we had a meeting, then we had to have another meeting the next week that was, went over the exact same thing, that ended, 2 community schools in one community is not a good thing to do because of the demographics of the lines.
That was K-5 though.
But it didn't matter, it was a community
Well,
school.
no, it's different.
How is it different, like, you?
Well,
Well,
it is,
Yeah.
it is different from what was the proposal, the K-5 proposal, community schools. However, I thought there was a sense that from the FAC, that community schools it's easier to manage, having the transition model rather
Right.
than the community model.
Right.
We will be looking for a recommendation
Yeah.
from the FAC, and ultimately it's the board's decision.
Right, again.
Yes. Okay. It's 10 minutes to 9. Does anybody need to take a break, or should we continue on with the
I need a
budget?
break.
Let's
I'm
take,
ready to move on.
let's take a 5-minute break, recess.
it's crazy to watch that really means something.
That's what they,
We used to,
the Badgers did that a couple years
when
ago.
I'm,
The Badgers.
Who were they over?
my first real job
The
was
stenographer or whatever.
Sent it to the
Remember, like, they
secretary.
would all gather around.
And that only lasted like,
Come up with
almost done, and then we all got
crazy
Apple II.
words
We
to
typed
make
up
her
our
have to type
words.
them. You can see afterwards.
That's awesome.
All right, I'd like to call us back to order, and next on the agenda is the 2018-19 preliminary budget. Jared.
All right, so as we work through our preliminary budget that the board will need to approve at the second board meeting in June, tonight I wanted to highlight and focus on debt, specifically debt due to the fact that some questions have came up regarding debt payments and when debt will fall off. In addition to that, I will be sharing this information with the Facility Advisory Committee on Tuesday at their next meeting next Tuesday. So the document that is uploaded on Board Docs, and also I did hand out because I did upload it today, it's also on our district website under Business Services. Gives us a snapshot of what our debt looks like through June 30th of 2018. Just to remind current board members and Andrew, if Eric was there, I'd say Eric, but new board members, when we talk about debt, there are two types of debt. There's Fund 38 debt, which is stuff that falls within our regular budget. So if we have Fund 38 debt, that's money that comes out of Fund 10, but we levy it as a Fund 38, so it's not additional above and beyond our revenue limits. Fund 39 is actually referendum approved debts, and so that would be through an actual approved referendum. They set out the dollar amount, and then we develop a debt schedule. So when we talk about Fund 38, there are currently 5 issues that fall within Fund 38, and the way that the spreadsheet is laid out, it shows you what the initial issue amount was, the type of borrowing, when we actually did the borrowing for it, description of the borrowing, the remaining principal that's left on that, and interest that's paying, and then the total remaining payments as of June 30th, and then the date of the final payment. So you can see in Fund 38, we have our energy efficiency projects. The district did 3 phases with McKinstry, and then when we made the changes to our teacher retirement plan, we needed to pre-fund that, and so we did do a borrowing that comes out of Fund 38. And then our 40-acre land purchase on Bus Road, we took out of Fund 38, and you can see that. So for the 2018-19 budget, which is on the bottom portion of the spreadsheet, it shows you that our principal payments for this coming fiscal year would be $210,000. Interest payments would be $420,000 for a total debt payment of $630,605.
And just know that's Fund 38, so that's paid. That's what the portion that's paid out of Fund 10.
Yes.
Okay.
Now moving on to Fund 39, the referendum. We currently have 6 issuance that is still active on our books. Some of these have been refinanced over the prior 7 years. More recently, like it's been 2 years since or 3 years since we've done the last one. The district went through when interest rates decreased, did on all of our debt that we could possibly do, refinance that to take advantage of interest rates that were around the 1 and 1.5%, resulting in over $1 million worth of savings that is directly passed along to our taxpayers through levy reduction. It cannot be put back into classrooms because it's coming out of Fund 39. So of the 6 issuance, you can see. And I had it's the same concept as before. It tells you about how much the issue amount was, the type of borrowing, when the borrowing occurred, the description of what each of those issuance are, the principal that's remaining, interest that's remaining, total, and then the final payment. I would like to point out that in Fund 39, the referendum approved debt, our last payment that will be made is actually May of 2026. And then if we were to go forward with no other referendums from this point on, we would be debt-free in Fund 39. However, obviously with enrollment, there could be some changes with that, but to point out that, and it lists out each of those 6 issuance, and then when we look at the actual budget for Fund 39, the total principal payments that we'll be making in 18-19 is $4,415,000. Interest will be $555,000 for a total Fund 39 debt payment of $4,960,000. $4,770, which is actually a reduction from this year's budget by $4,068. So part of that refinancing allowed us to also level out, and so we weren't experiencing peaks and valleys, and which ultimately helps us in our total levy due to the fact that when debt service is established, they obviously look at the existing debt schedule and they try to put in there, but if there's interest rate spikes and things like that, what we were experiencing is that our levy was fluctuating, and part of that was because of debt. And so in addition to getting the interest savings, we were able to not extend any debt payments. We were able to take those interest savings and front load and back load to make our debt level. So as you're seeing, Fund 39 is decreasing by 4,000, which is pretty level when you look at a budget close to $5 million. So that is just a quick overview, and as we move forward through the next couple of meetings, obviously I'll bring points of interest like this for a complete budget to be put together and a complete packet for you guys to approve. Preliminarily at the end of June, for individuals that are not aware of how the budget works, we do not approve our final budget until the end of October, which is 5 months into our fiscal year, because our fiscal year starts July 1, because majority of our budget is based off of the third Friday count and revenue limits. And then we do not know from the how much money we're getting from the state of Wisconsin until October 15th. But this also will be presented at our annual meeting in October, the first Wednesday of October.
Okay, just for information, I'd like to point out that it says date of borrowing on each of these. That's the refinance date on these items.
Yeah,
which
so
is why you, for example, have a 1997 referendum with the date of borrowing is shown as 2015.
Right, so that,
that's
yeah.
a refinance date.
Yeah. Because some of those refinancing might have taken 2 debt borrowings, combined them into one, so it's the most recent borrowing. That's why it shows that.
Questions about the debt, the district's debt? One discrepancy, one disparity I noticed between Fund 38 and Fund 39, the ratio of principal to interest is quite a bit different.
Yep. Part of it is that in Fund 38, most of these, in Fund 38 we didn't do any refinancing because that was during the time when we were doing the initial borrowing, the interest rates were low. Those are what we would classify as young debt payments. So the borrowing was, so we didn't, we experienced, so we're paying more interest up front, just like on our mortgage. Typically you pay more interest, and then as you get closer to the end of your mortgage, it starts to flip-flop and you're starting to pay more principal. So as you can see in Fund 38, we're coming to the end of most of our debt payments, and so we're paying more in principal.
Anything else? All right, very good, thank you. Next is revised board policies.
All right, and these are the result of the last 2 policy meetings, and they're all here for a first read. So I would encourage you to go through them. The changes aren't, do you want to say anything about these, Dan?
Yeah, so the majority, these are from the last update we had from Monona Policy Services. As you look at them, you'll see many of those are very minor changes, and for clarity, or sometimes there was a change in the statutes that required it, and so there's a large number of policies. I said most are not substantive changes.
Yeah, I was trying to list these. There's not one here I'd really think to highlight. I don't think.
Yeah, so. Now, one of the things that we realized as far as accessing those, because they're in draft form, only the board has access. You have to be logged into Board Docs in order to see these drafts, and that's the way that the system's set up. So make sure that you're logged in. If you're not logged in, you'll just take you to the home page. So.
Here.
Team?
Are there any of these policies that have real substantive changes, or?
No, that's what I was trying to think about as we went through these, because it's been over a period of the last month or so, but really not.
I think that they're mostly clarifications
They're
of
mostly-
language.
Yeah, mostly clarifications, there were some,
A lot were due to statutory change, so for
Right.
instance, a really good example is we now have a policy that's called Early College Credit Program, because they
That's the one I was
changed the
trying to-
youth
yeah.
option
Yeah.
Right.
statute.
right.
So that was totally deleted, and this was totally rewritten, and it's all statutory.
Yeah. Probably the easiest way, if you have questions on these, to try to find out the rationale, probably go to the committee meeting agenda on the board docs, because there's more information that takes you right to the links with the rationale, instead of trying to find it yourself.
It's really-
I mean, if you wanna look, the district support organizations one is substantially changed. Yeah, it was a high degree of specific things in it, and those have been, changed,
So all those
dropped.
were optional pieces in the, NOAA templates that we originally had chosen, and then after consideration thought that is too specific, and best to not have all that in there.
Okay.
Again, another really good example is under committees. They added, you can click on it, open it. The only thing that's changed, and it's in green, was a committee shall require a quorum consisting of a majority of its members to take any action. That was to add clarity. It was already
Yeah.
in there, but it wasn't well written.
Yeah, that's right, exactly, it's just to clarify that point.
We got,
Student academic
these were not our difficult policies, we got through these.
Yeah,
Yeah, the early college credit one, really,
yeah,
a lot of red, but then a lot of green.
that's right, the green is the new language, the red is,
Right. There's a
they
lot
changed
of
it to the red first, but the state statute did, and then changed it
Okay.
back again, so it's kinda, It's, some just clarifying diploma deferral, for,
Right.
they aren't real significant. They're changes worth making, but they're not substantive. I don't know why this one goes.
Okay, any questions about the policies?
So if you do look at any and have a question, feel free to email me. I have the background documents, but just flipping through these, I'm not saying much either.
Mm-hmm.
Some. So,
Okay,
anybody has any questions?
good. Next item on the
They'll be on the next meeting though for approval, possible approval.
Next item on the agenda is board committees. There's two items I wanted to discuss. First of all is just briefly, Andrew was a member of the Facilities Advisory Committee before he was a board member. Now he's a board member. I just want to make sure it's a sense of the board that he can continue on that committee as a board member, until there should be wrapping up relatively soon, I believe, if we look at the schedule. But if anybody has if there's any concerns about that, because we didn't have a board member on the committee before.
Oh, right.
So now we would.
Yeah.
Facilities Advisory
Right.
Committee.
Yeah.
And if anybody has concerns about that, I believe, as far as I'm concerned, I believe I have to make an appointment in that case. But if anybody's concerns about that, yeah.
I would also encourage that Andrew continues in his, in his role as a citizen member rather than as a board member, understanding that you're still gonna come back here and rehash everything. People may look to you differently when you offer an opinion, so.
I'm gonna
just
be quiet.
You should be quiet.
I'm gonna be quiet,
But keep offering it as a person that lives in the community rather than
Right.
as a board member making an opinion. You don't do that, I would never see you do that, but it has been done in the past.
I always felt there should have been a board member on there, so thanks for adding me.
I know, well, now you have it.
Okay.
Okay. Andrew, you're on the Community Engagement Committee, not Facilities Advisory Committee.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
I'm sorry.
I was trying to
But I had a
say,
discussion.
And I had to
think so, and I was thinking,
No,
oh, really? Okay.
No,
But
we
you
were talking
said-
about Facility Advisory Committee.
But I said I would like to be
No, I'm
part
sorry.
of
Yeah.
it.
No.
I would like to be part of that.
No,
My
he went to
mistake.
that as
Because
part
you were
of
at
the
you were at the
engagement,
meeting the other night.
Yeah.
I thought you were on the committee.
No, no.
I take everything
Take
back.
your,
I take
I
everything
was
back.
like, I don't think so, but.
It's not an issue at all. Thank you very much.
It's because they invited the community.
Right.
Right, that's where you're going.
That's-
We all
Yeah.
attended
Am I-
once and.
And I said Facilities Advisory Committee.
Right.
You probably didn't.
So what we
hear it.
did was allow him to continue on a committee
That he was
never
not,
on.
exactly.
Right, that's right.
Okay.
All right, my mistake. Then that's good. So the second item is last time we were here, we discussed. We had a discussion about the board's interest in forming a committee to look at the achievement gap and equity issues in the district. Towards that end, I took some input that I received from various board members and synthesized just a draft proposal for what I think would be charged to the committee if we would like to move forward in this direction. So there's two questions. One is, do we want to move forward in this direction or in any particular direction? And second question would be, is this an appropriate, or how would we like to, is this an appropriate charge, and how would we like to, or would we like to modify it? Move forward. Susan.
Well, I think we also talked last time about feeling like there were.
Let me just, before we get started procedurally, I'm gonna suggest that the board will continue to discuss current standing committees. So I'd like you to ask for any comments on the current standing committees first, because this is gonna be our big discussion. I think we can finish the other one fairly quickly. So if you wouldn't mind
Sure.
doing this first.
Sure, any comments?
I do have a comment for that as well. Our board policy says for all the standing committees, including community engagement, there can be up to 3 members.
Sure.
And I have stated this before, I really firmly believe there should be 3 members on every committee, because I think it's very difficult, and I kind of made light of the debates Susan and I get into, but it's difficult sometimes to just have 2 people on a committee. It doesn't feel like a committee sometimes, and it's helpful to have a 3rd voice. And I think particularly when you have someone volunteering to be on it, it makes sense to have 3 board members on a committee. I do understand that nobody else wanted to do policy. I will put out a plea again. I would really prefer to have 3 people, so if somebody else is willing to do it. We've been meeting during the day, but that's only because everybody was free during the day. We don't have to do that.
The logical thing to do is
Dan other night.
the logical thing to do is to point Eric, since he's not here.
Well, there you go. Okay, but anyway, seriously, if somebody would be interested in that, I would really. I also think it's even though the policy stuff is drier, it is.
When do you meet?
Governance. Well, we would determine that by right now we meet during the day, and we don't have a set day. But it is important in terms of governance, and it does help you understand the kind of rules and how. So, but it's.
So could you?
So we could change the meetings to late afternoon and evening too. It doesn't have to be. We've been meeting in the mornings because the 3 of us could, but now that Jeff's stepped off and doing something different. So if you're interested, you don't have to decide right now.
You don't have to decide right now.
If
Yeah,
somebody is
please-
interested, you could
please make your
send me
interest
an email.
clear.
It'd be awesome to have another person.
Again,
Susan?
I'm gonna comment on personnel. I think it's very difficult. When we had 3 on the committee last year, Peter was out of town, and it was Dean and myself, and we didn't totally agree on an issue, so it was unresolvable, because you're at one-on-one. With 3 people, you're almost always gonna have at least 2, so you can hold the meeting. With 2 people, I mean, you had a meeting scheduled for Thursday night. Was that canceled due to attendance, or canceled because you didn't need it, or?
Because one committee member is not available.
So you've got 2 committee members on, 1 can't be there. We scheduled this meeting a month ago, and the teachers had planned to be there, and it's canceled because there are only 2 members on the committee. And there has been a volunteer for that committee. So the 2 major committees, policy and personnel, are critically important to the work that we do, and minimally, I strongly advocate and support 3 members on those committees. And actually, you supported that, Dean.
I supported 2 or 3, but.
You told me 3.
I've supported 3.
So you're changing that? Okay.
Any other comments?
And he's the chair. Now you've heard from another chair.
So we have these 2 committees, and then.
We have 3 committees.
3 committees, okay.
3 standing committees. We're talking about a 4th, the potential of a 4th one.
Okay.
But I think,
Thank you.
and I guess I felt like community engagement could be too, only because there are so many community members on that, and I'm assuming I hope that's going to continue, and I
That's
think the
my
other thing is that when we have these
assumption, yeah.
committees, that you do need to work with the staff person, so that, I assume that committee will be working with
Yeah.
Katie as the staff person in the same way that, I mean, Dan gets stuck with
Right.
the policy part, but, and, you know, and personnel generally involves,
Okay.
and Jared, you know,
Yeah,
so the relevant
we
staff
have,
members do attach
right.
to the committees and.
It has had 2 board members and then a number of community members, and my intention is to continue that, or work with the chair of the committee to continue that. And of course, it's a little bit different this year because we're going to have our community engagement director, who
Right.
will, a communications director who will,
I would think
would be part of
guide-
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
guide the work, I would think.
Yeah. Susan?
I guess I'd really like to know if there's board consensus on 3 members on the policy and personnel committee. Jeff, we couldn't have held that meeting where I couldn't be there. You and Susan did 15 policies that day. That couldn't have happened. That would have been canceled.
I think it depends on if somebody wants to serve it.
I said,
Yeah.
if there's a volunteer.
Right.
If nobody wants to sit on it.
I don't think,
then
I mean,
But are you opposed
no,
to 3 members?
I don't think
No.
anybody is, right?
You
If
would
somebody
support
wants
that.
if somebody wants to volunteer, I don't think anybody's saying, no,
Right.
you can't be on the,
Andrew?
right?
I like to think about it.
I'll discuss it with,
Forcing him to be on
I will
the
discuss it with the chair of the committee,
Okay.
and see how we can move forward. Okay, back to, first of all, the first question is there a consensus that we want to move forward and with I don't know what we call it, GAP committee that we started, and what direction does that go? And we had a discussion last time, and what I got from this group was the committee, but a focus, at least an initial focus, on our academic achievement gap and equity issues that are before us, and perhaps a larger focus, larger focus of the committee certainly, but perhaps for not the initial focus. But go ahead with the discussion, Susan.
Well, what I got was, we didn't have a total consensus, but I thought I was hearing more of a consensus on, among at least several of us, of a sort of a more general teaching, learning, and equity committee that would have a broader charge, and that this could be a focus of that, or it could be a separate ad hoc committee. I have a few concerns about this. One is that when I listen to the comments, we're doing a lot of work in this, and when I hear people say we should study what other schools are doing, it's making a lot of assumptions that none of this is already going on, and that troubles me quite a bit. That's why I really feel like before we set up a committee like this, or even the curriculum type of committee, that I would like to see us have either a special meeting and meet as a committee of the whole to just bring staff in and discuss what are we doing now. What needs do you see? We have an equity alliance. How would an equity committee interface with that? Part of the community engagement committee, and that was the part that Andrew and I were kind of working with, was outreach of underserved communities, and I would hope that would continue, that effort would continue, and the whole point of that was to get those parents more engaged, find out ways, and all we did was and we actually at our last meeting, interestingly enough, came to the conclusion that we should find out what the problem is first. We should find out how big, like, what is our attendance at parent-teacher conferences. We really didn't have all that information because that committee also got, we ended up talking about this and other issues. So I think I guess I'm concerned with developing a charge for either of these types of committees without the board having some discussion with staff about what we're doing now and what they need. When I look at these charges, and even the one that you came up with, Peter, here, a lot of this looks to me like staff work. Making ongoing assessments of the opportunity gap, equity issues, status of existing district efforts, including soliciting input from stakeholders. Some of that is done by staff or should be done by staff. Monitoring and reporting district progress, now that could be something a board committee could do, but that would be involving staff to come in and report on what they're doing. I think we need to see, what issues do teachers see and do other staff members who are working on this see? I think interpreting the test results is problematic because we have changed the test every couple of years. I'm not going to make excuses about it, but I think we have to have a better understanding of what does it really mean? What do these figures really mean? And all the formative assessments that go on in schools on a regular basis. I've heard elementary teachers talk, for example, about how they'll do formative tests on language arts, for example, and they'll regroup kids. I mean, they're constantly meeting in their team time to think about what can we do better to reach these particular kids, or this group, these few kids don't have this skill yet, what do we need to do better? I mean, they have these conversations all the time. And I think we just need to be better informed as a board about what's already going on and what kind of help could they use. You know, would another social worker help, or what kinds of things did they want to find out that would make a difference before we would do something like this? When I look at the makeup, I think for the board to appoint an administrator to a committee, that's never happened before. Typically what happens is we'll have a chair of a committee, or there could be 2 board members chairing it, and then Dan, as superintendent, will assign the appropriate administrator to the committee, and then you can invite other people to come in. So I have a concern about that makeup. I have a concern about putting students on it, in that I'm not sure what people are thinking of. I assume you're thinking more of high school students, but are you thinking of high-performing high school students who are then going to weigh in on what they think their lower-performing peers need? Are you going to try to, you run into all kinds of student privacy issues. How do you identify? I mean, I just think there are lots of things here that require a whole lot more thought, and I don't think we've scratched the surface of a discussion and have all of us up to speed on what's currently going on in our district, to know what we need to do differently and what could we do to support our staff in these efforts. You know, I mean, I think, you know, community engagement, when we talk about trying to engage parents, that's challenging, but that's, I mean, you know, if we wanted to do, you know, to try to find out what the experience of minority parents was is one of the things we talked about. Well, one, you gotta go ask them. I mean, ask what they need, and how do you do that? And those are the things we wrestled with, and those are pretty basic, and I saw some of those come up on Eric's description. I thought was far more implementation. Again, I'm looking at the board role versus the staff role, and I think we have to be mindful of that and mindful of the limitations of our own knowledge of what we currently do. That's kind of, so I'm not opposed to this, and I'm not opposed to a curriculum committee, whatever we want, but I just think we have more work to do before we do the committee.
I guess my comment was, just a second, was listening to what you have to say.
Yeah.
It was a very good justification for why we need this committee, because it's communication. It starts with communication.
But how can we
hang on. And why the first charge here is about communication. And I don't think the issue, I think the board has a real problem with visibility and communication into these issues. And a great way, my experience is a great way for us to get into that is to support a smaller group of people who can take the time to focus on that and help developing our understanding. Which is, you know, why I believe that we need something along these lines. Now, the exact charge, I don't know, but I think a working group that can work much more closely with administrative staff and then report out to the board, you know, take that information, synthesize it, then report it out to the board. I think it would go a long way to helping the board understand all these issues. And why I think also the charge as I wrote it is like, threw away any of the specificity about what the committee would do that came to me when I sort of put this together, because I want the committee to work with the staff to determine what those issues would be, what the plan would be, rather than having in the charge what the plan is, what those specific issues is, so to make it as general as possible, so that the group can, using that, building on the communication that they'll start with, move forward. Anyway, that's my logic behind what I've done with the information that came to me together. Andrew.
From the subcommittee, the community engagement, we are getting presented with other committees. And if you look at what is being presented, they all fall under community engagement as a whole. So why would we have one subcommittee and branch out to three separate? We have the equity, we have
The Equity Alliance.
Equity Alliance, community engagement. Then we have Forever Friends Club, you know, you have Miles Monona, you have all these stuff, and everyone is right under that umbrella. So the first thing is, I think that all of these umbrellas should come under the one, community engagement. We have a community engagement person we can hire. Now, what we need to do, because school district's been talking about this stuff for what, 8, 10 years, just talk. There's not been any action. What do you need to do to have some attainable goals? Start off with like three of the main topics that needs to happen. When you get those 3, then the domino effect will start hitting, and then you will start getting more community engagement. Remember when I said 2 weeks ago about families? The only families that come here are married, 2-income homes. Their kids may not be having the achievement gap issues. The achievement gap issues come from single parent homes. How do we reach out there to them? We need to find these students. We need to hear their stories. Their parents may be working 3 jobs. This is why a lot of these students cannot go to after-school programs and be in sports and stuff, because they have to go home and watch their siblings. These are your issues. I know this, because I lived it, okay? Don't keep making all these subcommittees. Fall under one, the community engagement. Start with 3 attainable goals, which we talked about. You've talked about them for 8 years. We recently just talked to them just this past year.
We did.
If we get it, now we need to work with it. Then the domino effects will start with all the other issues. But if you find the 3 main ones and work with that, see the improvement. You may see improvement in test scores. You may see minority students going into more AP courses. They need these are the ones that need the help. The 2-parent home income, I believe they're doing fine. They may be having some issues, a couple of issues. I know that I read files every day. Okay? A lot of 2-parent homes, they're not perfect homes. But at least we have to get a start. Get these communities involved in community engagement. Then we can start breaking out the sessions to work on different types of issues. Start with 3. And I think that those 3 can be done within the school year. And we can see improvement, then we can go out and do more. But we need to stay focused on one. I do love this one with the Equity Committee. I like the one that Eric presented as well. But they all correlate together. We just need to find that common ground in one committee and get these things going. That's what I have.
Susan?
Well, and I don't disagree with a lot of that, and I think it's I think what goes on in the schools every day needs the additional, what kinds of things you were just talking about that we were talking about in the Community Engagement Committee. I think what, it does bother me when I hear the statement that we haven't had any action and we need to have attainable goals, because our schools do have plan, do, study, they do have action plans, and they are working on them, they do report on them to us. They may not be fast enough for some of us, but that doesn't, I'm not sure they can be faster. I mean, I don't know. That's what I'd like to talk to the staff more about. They are doing things now. None of us are satisfied with how, I mean, we'd all like to fix this problem yesterday. It isn't gonna happen. And so that's why I say I think we need to, I don't wanna hear us keep repeating that we're not doing anything, because we are. There are goals set. They're not huge goals because they're attainable goals. They're SMART goals. They're goals that we thought are attainable. And I think we need to hear from staff about what they think about as far as that piece of it. And the other piece, I think there are a lot of things we can do with outreach to improve engagement. You know, I remember there was a teacher at Winnequa a couple of years ago who noticed that none of her minority students were taking strings, and so she made it a mission to make sure that, and when she talked to them, it was because they didn't have access to stringed instruments, that kind of thing. She made it her mission to make sure they all got those instruments and got in the strings class. That's the kind of stuff we need to have going on in all of our schools. You know, I hear all these anecdotes about what people do, and we need to make sure that every child has an adult that is a key, that keys in with them and that knows their story and knows what's going on, knows what their needs are, and we so I don't know what progress we're making on that, and I'd like to hear that too. But I know there are efforts made along that line, but you know, that's where I'm just saying we don't have the information we need to develop a committee and develop a charge. And so I'm not adverse to doing this, but I think we need to know what we're talking about, and right now I feel like we don't. And it's not because efforts aren't being made.
Right.
That's right.
I like the effort what the teacher did a couple of years ago with strings. However,
That's just one thing.
will strings get you in college?
It can help.
You have to work with core classes, English, math, social studies, and
The
science.
research says if you're involved in the arts, that improves the other parts too.
So what you're saying is, start all the kids in strings from first grade. And just
We're
keep
getting a
on
little
going.
bit off track here,
Okay.
if I may.
Okay.
It
I know.
is
Getting like-
9:30, and
Yeah, we can't go.
I would rather not talk about specifics of what we do to address some of these issues. I want to talk about the structure with which we do that, which is, you know, is this board going to, as was expressed, I thought was expressed last time, set up a separate working group committee to start working at this, looking at this deal? That's the question we need to answer tonight, or at least make some progress on tonight.
Well, I think that the committees that that's being presented should be absorbed into the community engagement.
Anybody else think, have a?
I would be fine with that, but I think everybody is saying, we know that there's efforts being made. But people have been commenting at our meetings for months now. The efforts being made aren't working, so we need to figure out why and what's happening and how we can improve it. Because the results just haven't changed, and the results are not good for us. So we need to improve those results. How do we improve those results? By continuing doing what we're doing? We don't know what we're doing. I mean, you said it's been reported out. Things haven't been reported out to us, and we've asked and asked and asked. So there needs to be, that's why a committee is important with parents. If you want to put it under the community engagement, that's fine, but I think community engagement, opportunity gap are two different things. I want parents involved, but that doesn't necessarily, that will help a little, but that doesn't address problems in the classroom, and that's what we need to address.
The reason I wouldn't suggest putting it under community engagement is that it's different sets of people who will be interested in the issues.
That's what you can do in ad hoc, right.
Which is why I
agree with you.
I would suggest setting up a separate group of people, because I think the community members who are engaged in that have different skills and different concerns and different interests, and so separating them out, I think, is a better idea.
But once again, what community?
What do you mean, what
The two-parent home? Or the
Well,
single
it doesn't matter whether that's part of community engagement or whatever. We will look. I mean,
Okay.
You know, right? You would look at that, and
all I'm doing is saying, from the single-parent home, breaking the algorithm of of my family.
What I think what
use me as the beacon. I'm just saying, use me as the beacon, because you're not understanding how.
Right.
You're not understanding.
I think you're making an important point about the makeup of the committee and who it tries to serve and who it tries to identify for. I think it's a very good. I think it's a really valid point about who the community tries to bring in for communication. It's really valid. Over here, Susan Manning.
I think it's really important in listening to Jeff speak again, listening to Andrew speak, listening to Susan speak. Here's what you all said. We don't really know where we are right now and what we're doing right now. So I think the first thing we need to do is, as soon as possible, schedule a board workshop to know exactly whether it's strategic plan or whatever, but we need to hear from administration in relation to what we're currently doing. Now, if you say that's not working, but you think it's a good system, then you keep that system and you improve it. If you think it needs a new system, but you're not gonna know that until you know what they're currently doing. How are you gonna come up with an idea of what works and what doesn't work if you don't know what we're doing and how that's affecting the kids within the district? So I think the first thing we have to do is sit down and have a board workshop and have a presentation on, and pick your focus, if that's the opportunity gap, if that's a strategic plan pieces to that. Give a little bit of the history. I mean, we had a presentation 5 years ago that basically said we're doing fine on this, and then you opened up the report and saw the numbers and you thought, what? No, we're not. Yeah. So we need to know, where are we now?
Susan?
Part of where we are now is the validity of comparing test scores over the last 3 years when the tests have been changed, and you're the first person usually who says we can't pay attention to test scores.
We have a lot of problems that go beyond test scores.
Well, no, there are, but I'm just saying, I think the problems are myriad and they go beyond that, and we need to find out more what that is. Do we need, more multicultural books in the libraries, more, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and that's why I say, until we talk to staff, I don't understand what the harm would be in having a meeting where we bring in staff and get their input. And then, I mean, we're talking a few weeks here, and we're hitting summer anyway. The other thing I wanted to make, the point I wanted to make about the committee composition is, I would prefer to have it left to the board members and not specify the rest to say there'd be additional members, but leave it to the committee chair or co-chairs or however we would decide to do something, if we do something like this, to decide, like we did with community engagement when Carrie wrote out put a plea in the paper and we got all kinds of wonderful applicants. You can't require teachers to be on committees, that's outside their contract, so you can't appoint them to committees. They're also not available in the summer because they don't work in the summer. Most of our administrators now do, but again, we can't appoint people. So it's more a matter of, as I said, having the superintendent decide the staff. So the makeup of it is problematic in the way I see it described right here.
There's numerous teachers that have told me they would love to be on a committee.
That's fine. If they volunteer, we can't appoint them. That's what I'm saying.
Right. If they thought a committee was actually going to do some actual work, they would love to be on it.
Okay, that'd be great.
So
I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying.
I mean, you can change the charge that it will solicit volunteers, teachers.
Right. Well, I would.
Yeah.
That was
Sure.
my point. If we're good, but I still don't. What is the objection to having a meeting and listening to staff about what we do now? What's the downside of that?
I'll give you a downside of that, because I think that work would be better done by a small group of people who are focused on it, who are focused on that issue, including the staff and community members that we that the committee comes up with the charge.
So
rather than do that twice, and the board would be free to attend, but let's get because I guarantee you that if we put together a group of people, we're going to get this presentation and say, it's all done, we don't need to do anything more. I guarantee you that we will as a board decide, yes, we want to move forward. Even if things are much better than people imagine, or much worse, we're going to want to move forward, I think, in this direction. I think that's what I've got. So why not work together, work to find the right group of people to help work on this? You keep talking about communication issues. I think a great way to solve these communication issues that we have, what we don't know, is to set a group working on it. That's I think is the best answer to that question. Let's set a group working on it. Let's get going. And if we're going to ask the teachers and staff to put together a big presentation about what it is we're doing and where our status is, where we are, which I think we certainly need, let's have the board come to that, but let's also have this group of people that we think are committed, community members that we've heard from. Let's put this all together and get them involved right from the get-go. That's what I have, because I don't think delaying this so that the board can get some information. Yeah, it's always great to have more information. Delaying this so the board gets more information. We're going to want to move forward from there. So let's just set up the structure with which we can move forward.
One thing that cemented it for me, and I brought this up the last time, was when Ann last time says, Forever Friends ran this talent show, was great. it was a great fundraiser, now we're gonna buy multicultural books for the libraries. And nobody batted an eye. And to me, that was like, why in God's name are we having a volunteer committee do a fundraiser to buy multicultural books for a district that is in desperate need of changing the achievement gap? That should have been, that should be an automatic. Like, everybody should be like, oh my God, no, you don't have to buy books for us. Like, but nobody batted an eye. So we have a lot of work to do as a board, as a district, as administrators, as teachers, and a lot of teachers understand that. So that's why I think it's very important to get rolling on this immediately. So.
Yeah, my point is more to, if we're gonna do it, to inform the charge. That's again what I thought. And if you wanna,
Well, that's why.
I don't know how we write the charge without knowing what we need the committee to do, and I don't know how we know what the committee should do until we know what's being done.
Well, I guess.
And it's just difficult for me.
I guess my question would be, what would your comments be on the charge that I tried to synthesize, just as a draft to just start this discussion? But my question would be, what would you add in there to make sure the scope is?
Well, since I just saw these this afternoon for the first time, I'd have to give them a lot more thought. I'm not real good on my feet at that. After 4, yeah, it was late in the day when I saw them.
Dan, do you have any?
Some of them struck me as, when it says identify a plan of action intended to reduce the gap and other equity issues that persist, I thought, okay, different than what we have, or I just, the people that have to develop the plan, have to carry out the plan in the schools are the staff. So we do have to have them involved in a committee, but we have to know, again, they gotta know what they're doing now. People in the community can't do that, and I think they can do the other community pieces, and I do think engagement is important. I do think strings are important, and art classes are important. I am a firm believer that the arts, and that's what I heard today from Waster Mundo and the whole, when the teachers talked about what a bringing together of a community experience this whole thing was. I think those things are very important. And I think we do need to be paying attention to that. I've always said when we get those reports every year of how many kids are participating in all the extracurriculars, one of the things I always am looking for, how many of our minority kids are participating in these things, and how can we get more of them too? And not just Everett Mitchell. When I went to hear him talk, he said not just sports, he wants them in music and art and that kind of. So I just think it's a whole lot of things that come into this to make it work well, and so yeah, I'd have to look at this again. I do have real problems with the composition right off the bat. But I'd have to think more about the rest of it, and I guess I'd like to be able to do that.
No, before we go on, Dan, I know Dan wants to weigh in on this. He's been like,
I know. We do this to you every time. You get all sorts.
No, that's all right. There's been, when I listen to all the comments, okay, there's so much misinformation that's stated. Okay, first of all, okay, the last 2 years, okay, each fall, we've had our entire administrative team, all of our principals report out in detail the exact action plans that they have in place for their schools, the data that we're looking at, the data we're trying to move, and then we report out at the end where we're at. And every time that we've done that, the feedback I've gotten from the board, okay, this is great information, thank you for sharing. Never once is there a follow-up, but could you also report on this or that, or and so on. We'll be glad to do it. We have so much more data that we track on a regular basis, okay, that hasn't, you can't fit into a single board report. And so I would urge you to please spend time and let's look at, I don't know what the problem is that you're looking at. Achievement gap is such a big, idea. Which achievement are we looking at? Do we care about ACT scores? Do we really care about the Ford exam? I'll tell you, the Ford exam is way down the list as far as priorities that we see as relevant data. There's so much other data that we look at, that's so much more important. So there are places that we have seen growth. Clearly, we're not anywhere close to where we want to be. We're all on board with that. And community engagement is a huge piece. We know that that's a big piece about student success, is engaging the students and their families. So there's definitely work to be done there. But we need to talk about what is that work. So as far as welcoming, community members, parents to partner with, without question. We need to find a way of doing that. But to put a committee together and say, okay, how are we going to solve this achievement gap? What do you think we've been doing? Okay, it has been a priority. And so let's look at working and supporting the work that's done, okay, as opposed to starting from scratch on some separate committee that may be trying to do the same thing that we're already doing.
Have we gotten a report that says the suspension and expulsions rate of minorities and white students? Or minority literacy rate? I don't remember getting those, because I know last year I said that 50% of the kids we expelled were of color, and I got a lot of grief for that. Like, how did you know that? Like, you know, so.
Well,
we haven't gotten those reports, and that's a big part of the
We do get
opportunity.
PBIS reports, and that is in there. We do
Because
get that.
you were the one that called me and said, how did you get that? How did you know that?
Oh, when you looked up the number of expulsions, that's from the DPI website.
Right,
The
and
suspensions.
half of them last
We
year
do
were
get
of
that
color,
from PBIS.
which is an unacceptable
but
percentage.
okay, let's talk about, that we can't talk, that's confidential, but you need to look at cell size. A huge piece when we look at our data, we have several grade levels that are reported out that we can't even report the data publicly because there's too few number of students in those particular groups, and so that's not even available. Okay, but we do look at it internally, but it can't be reported out at an open board meeting. So yeah, we can provide more as far as what has been reported out. I don't recall what has and hasn't in certain years, but I can tell you that those reports exist, and our principals and our teachers look at that on a regular basis.
But the value of that, Dan, would be for a smaller committee to be able to examine that in the outside of a public context, and to
So it has to be a public meeting.
Yeah, and that data wouldn't be able to be shared at a public
Yeah.
meeting.
What's the law on that? What's the percentage rate that we have to be before you can tell us
Well,
what our gaps are?
I mean, it all depends on where we're at, but in some cases, it's when you have groups that are 20 or less, that's definitely not part of the DPI data that's
But
reported.
we have
out.
more, in every class, we have more minority kids of color than 20.
Not necessarily, depends on how they self-identify. Okay, students are identified sometimes as either black, African American, 2 or more races, Asian.
Which
I
is
mean,
still
there's-
not white. You can do white and unwhite.
Right.
And we don't
But to
get that.
lump all students together, I mean, and we look at that, but understand that you can't make assumptions about every student and say if you're part of this group, you have the
No,
same
but
needs.
You can look at the percentages.
Sure.
And, literacy rates, how many kids are in AP, how many kids are in the arts. Like, we can look at all that stuff. And it makes a difference. And if suspension and expulsion rates have not went down, then we're not doing something right. And we haven't changed anything. And
But you're
I
making the
promise
assumption that that's a problem, because first of all, our
It is a
suspension
problem.
expulsion rates are well below state average, and they have gone down in some cases.
In some cases.
Right, and we're working hard on that, so.
But how are we working hard on that? That's what we want to know as a board. That's the stuff I ran on. Like, that's the stuff that.
Okay,
people
let's,
talk about.
let's talk about it.
I mean, it's not
Well,
a
let's-
surprise to you, is it?
Yeah.
That I want
We
to
do
know
get
that.
recommendations on that stuff.
that
That's
is-
right, we don't ask those kinds of questions, we
I
don't
ask those questions every time we
All
work
right,
on.
hang on a second. Let's talk about it. That's exactly the point of what I want to accomplish and what I've heard from other board members that they want to accomplish. Let's talk about it. And the fact that, and the way we talk about it, the best way to talk about that is to get a smaller group of people together and have that discussion, because you just keep talking about misinformation, and you're absolutely right, which is that first problem we want to try and solve here. As far as going off and doing something different, that's not the job of this committee. This is the job of this committee is to work with look at the existing, start with the existing, okay? Not more than start with the existing, sort of, what we do with its existing should be the primary focus, the primary direction of this committee. Look at these goals, look at this thing. And then talk about it. In addition to that, the other thing going forward, in addition to that, take input from, I think most importantly, the community. Because you're right, this is a problem, nobody's solving it. We need to open up and work hard on solving this.
Yeah. And please understand, if I can jump in, I am in support of creating a committee. I want to make that clear, okay? But what we're talking about is how that committee is formed and what the charge is. And I think before we don't know exactly. I think every one of you have a different idea of what you think the problem is.
Right.
So I agree, the idea of reviewing and the board, of course, part of your role is the accountability piece. And so to be able to review in a committee format where, you're right, we don't have time to go through everything that we do at a regular board meeting. So I'm in support of that idea. What I'm concerned about is setting a charge to try to fix something that you don't know exactly what it is we're trying to fix. To simply say fix the achievement gap is way too broad.
It doesn't say fix, that's the problem.
Well, I've seen documents that say
Address
that.
the achievement gap.
Well, we're not, yeah, okay, we got some documents, and those documents have people put on a lot of thought. I really appreciate the amount of thought and effort that people put into that, where they think we should go. However, those are not guiding documents, those are not the guiding documents that we're talking about here. And I did point out to those people that this is a great outline. It has a lot of good ideas in it, but really what you have to do is step back, start with a discussion with people, and then work. You can certainly put your ideas in, help put your ideas in, but work from there going forward to come up with that plan. There is no, in the charge that is presented before us, there isn't any specifics to that plan other than identify a plan of action, which is the most specific thing in here is identify a plan of action. That plan of action could be exactly what we're doing today, if the committee says that this is the most appropriate thing. But really, we have this opportunity. We have a lot of people who are interested in this, who kind of came to us in the last couple of months, told us we have a big problem. We all know we have a problem. I understand. But the most important thing that's going on here is we have a lot of people who are interested in participating, interested in helping us out deal with this. We need to take advantage of this. How do we take advantage of this? This I believe is an important way to help take advantage of that.
And any committee work anyway is done in pencil. So it has to come to the board before it's done in pen. So there's nothing that a committee can do that says this is what, it has to come and make the case to the board before anything gets action items.
Okay.
So are there any of us who don't want to get all this information? Because who's going to get on this committee? I mean, I want this information, and I'll come listen even if I'm not on the committee, but I'm going to ask again, why would we not have a special board meeting, which would be an open meeting, and community members could come listen, and we could have staff come in, and we could have a whole couple-hour conversation just about this, so we had a better idea about forming a committee and what the charge of the committee should be. I'm just going to go back to that. I'm just having a real hard time seeing why we wouldn't do that. I mean, I think we all want to know more about it and have a better understanding of what our staff sees as issues as well, and how they think we could maybe provide support. What do they think we need to find out more about that would help, that they'd like to know more about, how to involve parents or kids or whatever the issues are. I guess I'm going to ask, how many of us don't want to know more about this? Nobody. So we all want to know more about this. We all want the same information. So you're going to put 2 board members on this committee? What about the rest of us?
Yeah.
Well, that's like saying that
just saying.
that only 2 board members ever see the policy, which isn't true.
Well, no, but I'm just kind of flabbergasted.
No
that,
board member.
is there anybody else that thinks we should have maybe I'm all wet. I guess I should ask it this way. How many of us would like to have a special board meeting where we could get more information about this and then form a committee? A special board meeting within the next few weeks.
And how many would, I guess the alternative
It's
would?
only 2 of us, so maybe I'm wrong.
Okay,
Okay, I'll just.
So you guys already think you know what we're doing. So I'm gonna turn around to Krista and Lisa and say, oh, but the committee's gonna do the research and the investigation, that's your job.
Let's just sit here,
Is to
I was
be
waiting
recognized.
until you got done talking. You guys raised your hands, no one was finished talking, let's get some respect around here.
Thank you.
So then I can raise my hand.
Andrew.
Yeah, I was gonna raise my hand and she said, hey, stop. Them hands should calm, people.
Okay.
We're here to work together.
Andrew, you have something to say?
I would like that, maybe do that special. I would like to see that.
So my question is, should we move forward with that first, or should we move forward with thinking about putting a group together?
I think we should do a special meeting for this particular issue with the community to come in to talk so we can get these ideas and then start the committee.
Anyone else? Dean? I haven't heard from Dean. He's been very quiet.
Well, when I was at DPI, I had to implement Title IX throughout the state. Okay, and I went to probably 40 school districts that didn't want to implement, that hadn't done anything after the law was in. And all of them thought they had the data and they were doing fine. And they weren't. Title IX led into bisexual, gay, lesbian issues. It went into racial issues and so forth. So it became much broader. It was a 3.5-year effort that I was a part of. And I think if I were watching boards then, they were all a little bit like tonight. I think every board thought they were doing good, and much of it was being done, but I think they all had selective blinders, where they were not collecting the amount of data. And the first thing that had to be done is to come clean on looking at the data that you have. Not how hard we're working.
Right.
Not how hard we're working, or that we've done that, or that we've not done that, but actually what some data is. And, a few years back, we were having some of that stuff indicated there, and I think there were indicators there that we were not addressing many of the issues. And that doesn't mean that a lot of what we're doing weren't the right things to be done. Maybe we needed to do some different things or do it in a different way. I guess that I guess I would try to, at least at this point, at the impasse that I see, I would like to see maybe Eric, who's not here tonight, and a couple others of you, Andrew, maybe yourself, and whoever else wants to be involved. I'll step away to sit down and maybe plan 2 or 3 evenings in which we could not do 3-hour types of things, but maybe spend an hour and a half on some sets of data. Maybe we could deal with curriculum and et cetera, but we could also deal with dropouts and expulsions and some of those that hard data, whatever data might be available, and pull all that together, and then and I think we might then all be more appraised as to at least where some data presents a problem. But we also have communities, whether there are specific issues or specific agendas that dominate that. I wouldn't dismiss all of that. I would say that there may be some concerns we ought to hear and address, and that may not be with a PowerPoint presentation. Maybe we could go back and take a look at. Let me finish. Sure. I haven't spoken a lot here.
I just want to clarify your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm clarifying.
Okay.
And
I want to get specific about what you're proposing.
But well, I haven't spoken up here.
Go ahead, Dean. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dean. Go ahead.
And I would just like to get some of this stuff up on the board where we have data, graduation, what's happened in the last 10 years, by race, handicap, or whatever we can do and present like that. And if there's some stuff that can't be made public, maybe it could be done much more quickly with some other kind of generalization. I would agree that we do it, but I think we ought to do it soon rather than later, because it's going to get lost, and I think we need. I suspect there are some issues here in this very nice school district that we ignore because we are generally very successful in what we do. I don't know. I don't have the data on that, but that was just my experience with a lot of districts in the state. When I did this for 3 years at DPI, leading out of Title IX, and got into race and a whole lot of other issues, and a lot of districts, even after they had the data, they didn't touch anything and didn't do anything. Others addressed it marvelously and with programs which eventually got picked up by other districts. So that's my point.
Okay. My question to you, do you support the formation of a committee to do that work, or do you suggest we do that as a board as a whole?
Well,
Because that's what we're trying to get at tonight.
I think from what I've heard, I would like to see maybe 2 or 3 of you.
That's a committee.
Okay. No, I'm not about a committee, but whoever would like to meet with Dan and maybe Lisa and you know, and McCumber over there and say, and maybe some of your principals, that kind of staff, and say, let's kind of help define the problem and then shape it up a little bit on the presentation. I think we need to get it moving, and if this is the kind of thing we're gonna have, we're gonna be here in another year doing the same thing.
Right, I know, and the question is, what's the, exactly, we have to get it moving. The question is, before us tonight, and I'm hoping to wrap up a little bit, is what's the best way to get it moving? And I'd like somebody to make them a specific, I've heard a bunch of different things, I'd like somebody to make a specific
I don't have a
proposal.
specific
Jeff.
thing quite yet, but another thing that a committee can address, I would hope, that we can't get data on is, I think everybody here that have kids of color have said their kids have been called the N-word. What have we done about that? Like, I know 2 African-American families that pulled their kids because we just could not handle them very well. And I'm sure other people know other people. So, and we aren't getting that data. That data isn't going to show up in our stuff. But it's unacceptable to me that happens. So, and I'm not saying that if somebody calls someone a racial slur, is, you know, what have we done to work with the teachers and the staff to make sure to address that in the future? It's not, you know, I don't want to kick these kids out. I want to educate. Like, how do we have to change our whole cultural mind shift on this stuff. And it's hard. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of uncomfortable work, but it's something that we've got to start doing, and we can't do that just by, let's look at the data for an hour and say everything's fine. There's a lot of things that we need to address that we aren't going to know until we hear it from the parents. Because my kid doesn't get that. So.
Hey, just want to clarify, that's a perfect example. That is exactly what has occurred, okay, as a priority in one of our schools this year, the work that you just described, okay? Does that mean that, you know, problem solved? Of course not, okay? But you need to understand, you know, that is one example of something that is being done.
But it's being done, but I don't know what school you're talking about, but is it being done? Maybe a committee can say, okay, you guys are doing this, and this is outstanding, we didn't know that, but have you tried this and this, right? That's what a committee of parents and stuff that live it can say, have you tried this and this? Like, because I mean, a lot of people talk to me about these issues, and there's a lot of things that we aren't addressing, and we're addressing, some we are addressing very poorly, and some are addressing fine, so.
You know, I keep hearing you say we have a communication problem. You just said it to Jeff. We have a communication problem, right? Which
Well,
is that Jeff
at what
isn't-
level, micro level, is the
He's
board
g-
going to know every single thing? I mean,
Yeah.
and that's where we're back to, yes, let's continue. Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I think
Yeah.
you're developing thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We have a communication gap. It's very clear we have a communication gap, and that is what and the reason we're here discussing this is because we had this discussion at our last meeting, and I believed that there was consensus. I heard a consensus to move forward in this direction. Okay, now maybe we want to pull back from that as a board, but I heard a consensus at the time to move forward in this direction. And I believe that this issue of communication is the key, and in my mind, this is the way to get at that problem.
Okay, can I make a motion?
And Dean had his hand up
It's
first.
not on for action, so you can't make a motion.
Oh.
Well, we can make sort of.
No, you can't.
We can't make a motion to approve this.
I was gonna
but we
give you a
can-
specific.
But we can make motions for like plans of actions, how we're going to
Not
do
a
it.
motion,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not a
absolutely we
consensus.
can. And it's not a matter of
Not according
debate.
to Wisconsin law.
Yeah, it actually is. Dean?
The,
Right, like you know the law.
the
Way better than you do, Susan.
the
Go ahead.
Okay, Mockingbird issue and the parents who have spoken here, not the original complainants, but the parents who've spoken here. I've taken down some of their names. I've called them initially, and I've received 3 or 4 calls on the issue, and every one of those calls I think has lasted at least an hour and 15 minutes, and they all have a story to tell of their own life experiences and the experiences of their kids, a mixed race marriage and children in the school and that sort of thing, and not one of those discussions was angry. It was basically discussing the experience of their children in the school, and some of it was good, and some of it was not good, and not one of them would really like to take their kids out of the schools or anything like that. And we didn't get into that. We really talked about their lives and their children's lives and that sort of thing and that kind of experience. And I think those kind of people working maybe with a smaller committee, that's where the community engagement piece might come in. Working with a smaller committee can bring a dimension on this that can't be put up on a PowerPoint, and then we can integrate community and school someplace along the line in an appropriate spot. Now that's what I think we need to capture these parents or whoever they are and that sort of thing in a contemplative and thoughtful mode and not confrontational, that type of thing. And those are I ruined the whole, not ruined in that sense, but it ruined the whole plan Saturday morning was by talking to one lady and with mixed racial marriage with kids in the school, and it was very enlightening, the experiences that her children had in the schools, and they like the schools, and there are things that they would believe that could be done that would be better. So I think we ought to approach this constructively and positively, and not as a threat, Dan, but to look as a way to improve on and what we're doing, because I would like to not see every concern or complaint being handled by saying, "My God, we're doing that, and we're working hard at it," but to say. But to think about ways in which maybe we're not addressing that. How do we miss that, or something like that? I don't know if I'm making myself clear or not, but it's that's what I'd like to see.
That's exactly what we were trying to get at. I mean, what you just did and what you just talked about was what the community engagement, what we were hoping to get at this year with we came up with that list of stuff to go on. That to me is a very helpful thing, and thank you for making those phone calls, because I didn't do that, I have to admit. And I appreciate it, and that's the kind of information, that's what, when I said we need to know the stories, that's what we need to hear is the stories, and that might give us ideas of what we could be doing better. And I think it is more helpful than looking at a lot of test scores and stuff. But what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing on these proposed ideas is looking at test scores. That's why I was reacting to those. But yeah, that's what I mean. I think we have to have a bigger conversation about what we really want to do here.
I mean, this doesn't say anything about looking at test scores.
Right. I've never once
data gap,
So here, can I
That's
make
right.
a
Okay.
suggestion?
Yeah.
I would make a suggestion that you appoint a committee of 2 to 3 board members. Then we can get together, we can get moving and put a call out for community members and students and teachers, and get the committee set, and then have that meeting, and then the board would be invited, and then we're all on the same page. We can meet with the staff and say, okay, what are we doing? Where do we need to focus? And go from there. Because I think then we get all the information, get everybody together, and then we can start moving instead of maybe, I mean, I know how hard it is for us to get meetings sometimes. It could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and next thing you know, it's like
Yeah.
some people can make it, some people
Yeah,
can't. and,
next thing you know, 3 months have gone by.
Right, and nothing's been done. So get the committee, let's get the people on the committee, and then let's get this meeting set up, and then we could all be on the same page and work together, simpatico instead of.
How about we do this, building on Jeff's suggestion, which is we start with a limited charge. Then the board has a, once we get this data information, as a preliminary look at all this, then the board takes that and puts together a more specific charge that makes everybody happy. And I think part of the problem here is I wanna get people engaged right away. And I think that's important. I think some of the other board members have expressed that to me, get people engaged right away. I really don't wanna get hung up on the charge.
Right.
Because I don't wanna let it, drag this out. It's very easy to do. So maybe, I'm liking your proposals that we put together a group, as Dean suggested, Jeff suggested, without much of a charge at first. And then have their initial discussions about data, and then the board can help develop, with that group, a charge.
I think one thing.
You can get consensus on that tonight, you just can't do it.
Yeah, exactly, I can get consensus.
I think one thing that everybody has to keep in mind, and we lost track of this during the Mockingbird thing a little bit, is we're all on the same page. We all want the same thing. So let's get some new eyes looking at things, and let's get rolling.
For example, what would be allowed would be for Jeff make a motion that we bring that back to our next meeting, that sort of thing, because that's managing discussion, that sort of thing is allowed.
If
But
there's
consensus,
a
can't you
discussion item,
appoint-
that means no
Can you
motion.
appoint the committee in the meantime?
I do have to have authorization from the board to appoint the
Yeah,
committee.
consensus.
Oh,
Yeah.
that has to be in the next meeting?
That's right.
Okay.
Peter, why
Okay,
don't
hang
you
on a second.
ask for consent?
Instead of a motion.
Well,
There's
it's
no need
just,
for a motion.
I mean, it's just,
No, Peter,
hang on,
you're under discussion item.
I have a problem.
hang
You're
on.
not allowed to
Go
do this,
ahead.
you are president of the board. You can look up the rule if you want to,
It's a
we'll give you
Wisconsin
5
statute,
minutes.
we're not talking Roberts, it's an open
We
meeting
can,
violation to do
however,
that.
reach consensus, and that can empower us to move forward.
Well,
So, do you wanna argue about that for 30 minutes?
no, I don't wanna argue. In fact, that your discussion's out of order here.
Do a thumbs up.
I'm not gonna argue.
What's wrong with
First
that?
of all, hang on. Well, all right. Let me just discuss that. Doing a thumbs up is actually would be considered taking, is just the same as considered taking action. If we come to agreement here, it's the same thing as taking action violation.
It's legal.
No, cause you have to put it on the next word.
So much, my question
Yeah.
would be is, who would like me to come back at our meet with, along with just suggestion, come back with our meeting with a abbreviated charge for discussion and approval of a committee, just along the lines that Jess suggested. So what I'm asking for is permission to bring this back for discussion and possible approval at our next meeting.
I'm good with that.
Okay, all right, that's good, that's easy. Thank you, Jeff, for making that proposal. Give us a way out of that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will go over it very carefully with Dan, and in the meantime, and if people have suggestions, please send them to me. Okay, great, we get to move on. Can we do future meetings before we reconvene into closed section?
Sorry, I screwed that up probably.
What's that?
I probably messed that up.
I think we
should've-
probably messed that up, right, because we want to
Yes,
finish up
we
in
should.
closed session.
Yes, please.
And I did
Yeah.
notice that we should probably do future meetings first.
Yeah. Okay,
29th is the Facilities Advisory Committee, and the next school board meeting is the 13th.
Not be present.
Okay, thank you. Would you make a note of that, Andrew will
13th.
be? Yep. And 27th is the next. Anything else?
well,
What are the dates? Are you?
They're on the, yeah.
so I guess the question is, the idea of scheduling a board workshop, do we put that, do you wanna get something scheduled, do you wanna put that on hold and?
Well, I thought
we're
we
gonna do
would,
that now.
if we approve the committee, we would appoint the committee and then do the workshop.
No.
Oh.
Let's step back. The schedule, as to what is suggested, is school board workshop regarding strategic planning. And the question is there anything else we want to talk about in a workshop that says strategic planning? Or, because it was suggested that strategic planning at this point. And my thought would be, maybe we want to take a look at a different set of data in June relative to achievement, and try not to pile too many things on at once. But dates June 19th through 20th, June 21st for a possible workshop. How are people?
What date is that, you said?
June 19th, 21st. I think the 20th is a problem for me.
June 19th, my birthday, so I'm only coming if you bring me a cake.
Well, I will personally make you a cake,
Really?
Jeff. If that's what
I
it takes.
take it back, I think. I don't know.
Any of those, yeah, I don't know if that's one. Actually, Peter is actually a good chef.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well then,
Pies, yeah.
as long as you
Very
have
good
a,
at pies.
You haven't tried my raspberry
as long as
sherbet.
you have a witness, then I'm good.
He is good. All three of those dates are good for me.
Anyone else?
All days work for me.
Okay. What?
Not the 20th.
The 20th is a problem for me. But the 19th and the 21st?
That's a Tuesday or a Thursday.
Tuesday or Thursday?
Not the 20th.
Okay, yeah. And we have a little bit more time, and we'll discuss what we want. Okay. Send me again emails about if you think there's an important issue before us that we as a board need to have a workshop about, please send it to me. And if there's, and I'll see what kind of a consensus we get, and see what to talk
Did
about.
we get consensus on a date? Are we gonna pick the 19th or the 21st?
We just had everybody say that the 19th and the 20th, I'm sorry, the 19th and the 21st are okay?
21st.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we
21st.
can do the 19th, 21st, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll still get a cake.
We'll take the 19th if it's okay with everybody. But, yeah, but both of those dates are open. We can be flexible if necessary around the administrative schedules.
It'd be good to settle this so we don't, because stuff does come up. So.
Yeah, I know. I'll talk about with Dan. We'll just settle it as soon as possible, but just in case there's anything else that comes up. All right, at this point, I need a motion to reconvene into closed session per agenda item C for completion of consideration of enumerated subject of business.
So moved.
I second.
Roll call vote starting with Dean.
Aye.
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 Okay, we're in closed session, and we will convene the meeting from closed session, so we're done with the public tonight. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
That was a lively conversation. But I think
we got rid of the percentage of preferred.
I think
So they will have it.
Yeah.
I got-